Good evening, folks. I think we are up and running. So let me jump to the chill stream layout. We'll make sure audio, background music stuff is good, and then we will get into the actual tier list. All right, let me turn this down in my headphones. Let's do a sound check here for the background music. Some of the earlier ones are going to be a little bit softer and they might be hard to hear, but I think at least 3/4 of the ones that I've done should be around the volume of this particular track. So let me know if it's too loud. If it's pretty subtle, that's fine. A lot of them tend to be a little bit more quiet until some of the other instruments kick in. Let's see. Pink says can't really hear it. Also, hi Pink and Red Dragon. Okay, a little low. That's okay if it's a little low, because some of the tracks have louder instruments than others. I'll up it by about 10%. Because as the thing cycles, you'll probably be able to hear some of them more than others. I just don't want it to be too loud. But we'll leave it there for now. Just continue to give me feedback, and I'll keep an eye on the OBS readout here. And I'll just make it lower my headphones. All right, so what are we doing today? Let's see. We'll switch to tier lists. I don't want to waste any time. Once again, we're returning to Tier Maker. And because Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak comes out, technically for my time zone, late tonight, but for a lot of people, especially people in other parts of the world, it'll be Thursday the 30th in their time. But because Sunbreak's coming out, I figured, why not do a Monster Hunter tier list, specifically for all the creatures. And what we're looking at here is a tier list created by James Rainford1 on Twitter. And this list has a pretty comprehensive collection of every creature from Monster Hunter 1 through Sunbreak as of the announced quote-unquote known monsters. It doesn't include the new creatures that are in Sunbreak, and only has its flagship Malzeno down here, and I know Espinas from Frontier, which is making its re-debut in a game outside of Frontier. That one was added. It's somewhere in here, I think. Other than that, it's not including any of the new monsters that are specifically in Sunbreak, since no one's fought them officially yet. And the reason why you see this difference in style between the games... Oh, is it over here? Might be somewhere in here. It looks like the creator took the icons from the respective games they came from, which is why some of the older ones have a more simplified look. The ones from more current generations like World and Iceborne have this sort of style, and these kind of calligraphy painted looking ones are the Rise icons. So we'll be ranking them based on the order that they come up in the list here. It's not organized necessarily by game. It might be. That actually I don't know. But we gotta set some rules. And I want to do an actual text thing for rules. And I can pop it up on screen if people ask. So we're going to call this ranking rules. And I'll size this up so it's pretty big, and then I'll just pop it up whenever I need to refer to it. We want, let's see, same font. 1. Rankings based on creature design. Rankings based on hunt experience. Ranks are not based on gear. That is big text. Let me fix that. I'll probably use this text box for other tier lists in the future. That way, if we ever need to set rules for what we're doing, I can just edit this one. I know it's absurdly large. All right, I'm gonna put this here. Doesn't need to be centered properly because I'm gonna hide this every once in a while and re-show it. So we're ranking these based on the design of the creatures, based on how much fun they are to hunt, and the fact that their gear has relevant skills or whatnot does not factor into the rating. That would be an entirely different type of tier list. And we're going to focus purely on the aesthetics and the player experience. So if there's any questions on the criteria, I can just pop this thing back up on screen, and that'll be our rules. So this particular tier list, and I did share this one with Pink, they have done their own ranking. It includes small monsters that you encounter on the map, either non-hostile or hostile creatures. They're part of this list, and I don't want to bother ranking the small, either neutral or random monsters. So I separate them into the small monster tier. They're not going to be ranked. It's going to save us some time. Red Dragon says, also, is it me or is your chat box out of shape? The chat is staggered off of the actual box. That's just the way I have it set up so that it doesn't cut off. I could try and move it, but it's not really something I pay that much attention to. Let's see. That I might have to shrink a little bit. There we go. That's fine. I think it's just this layout. Be a little bit small, but now it'll be kind of fit in on the border. It's cut off a little, but that's fine. Oh yeah, Iconic's here. What's up, Iconic? How are you doing today? Okay, looking at the readout, this track is definitely louder. I'm gonna drop overall volume down. This is one of the louder ones on there, so we'll make it so it's not quite competing with me for audio. Red Dragon says, sorry, my OCD hates it. Well, I fixed it a little bit, so hopefully it doesn't bother you that much. If I shrink it down too much, it's hard to read. That's the other problem. I had it stretched out just so people can read it in the VOD. Alright. So let's see. We separated small monsters. I did this in advance to save us some time. A lot to go through here. And the bottom tier is for things I haven't hunted. And I need to add the flagship for Sunbreak, which was in the demo. I did not do that fight because I want to just experience it in game. But everything else on here, I believe I have encountered. If I happen to run into one I don't know, I will put it in the according tier. Red Dragon redeemed Small Raku. Alright. I'm going to put myself on the desk. And we got timer. Icon says, I'm well, how are you? I'm doing good. This is going to be a lot of me talking. So if you folks... Oh, here's Espinas down here. If you don't know much about Monster Hunter, prepare for a lot of discussion about Monster Hunter. And we'll see how much of this we can get through. There's a lot, but we'll just have to see. Now, Red Dragon redeemed... Drop a beat. Alright. We will pause BGM. Thankfully, I don't need to do anything else. My Dragon says, I do love Monster Hunter icons. Yeah, they're really neat. You can see how the style changes between games. They're kind of a more pixelated style for some. Some they're more like a flat vector style. And then the Rise ones are these kind of Japanese looking painterly ones. It's always really neat to see how it evolves across games. So yeah, we'll definitely be looking at all that. All right, for a beat. I haven't really thought about what I was going to do today, so I will just make something up. Let's get started. All right, let's put the music back on. And with that, we will officially get started on the tier list. So let's see, the first one on here, and I may have to double check my research on the wiki, make sure I'm quoting these correctly. This first one is an older gen monster that we haven't seen in any recent titles. I believe this is Copper Blangonga right here. And you'll see me kind of scrolling up a lot. I'll try not to do it rapidly so it's blurring around the screen. This one is a Pelagus type monster, similar to Rajang and the more monkey-ish monsters. Copper Blangonga is this kind of desert baboon. And it's got a rust-colored pelt and spits, I think, sand? Either sand or water. I'm going to put this one on C tier. It's not a bad fight. It's pretty standard. It's kind of like a less dangerous Rajang you fight in the desert. And this one was pretty common in the older games. I know it was in Freedom Unite. And then Blangonga has been kind of just absent from a lot of the games. But we'll put it here. And if I need to go and see what games specific creatures debuted in, people are curious, I can look that up. Most of these I kind of know, but for the older ones that debuted in specific games, I'd have to look that up. But we won't be really factoring that into rankings, so we should be good. Next up, this is Crimson Fatalis, I believe. Some of these icons I haven't seen in a very, very long time, having played a ton of games in the Monster Hunter series. But Crimson Fatalis is an elder dragon, a typical Western-style dragon with 4 limbs, 2 wings, and it's big, very big. And in all the games, it is focused on like a fire or blast element, and it's usually an endgame target that you fight. Crimson Fatalis is very aggressive and very dangerous. Pretty cool monster though. Red Dragon says, a dragon, you say? Yes, in fact, Crimson Fatalis is a kind of scorched dark maroon dragon. The Fatalis siblings, there's 3 of them. There's Crimson, there's the regular one, which is like a black dragon, and there's White or Elder Fatalis, which is like a bearded white dragon that casts red lightning. We'll see that one in the list. He's down here. These have to be custom icons because they look similar to their more recent games, like World or Iceborne. But the siblings for Fatalis have not appeared in a recent game. But Crimson is cool. Probably my second favorite of the 3 siblings. Next up, we have another Elder Dragon subspecies. This is Ashen Lao Shenlong. And this one had to be second generation somewhere. First or second generation old PS2 era, or possibly Freedom. Lao Shenlong, its base species, is a big... Well, the regular one is a red dragon, but it doesn't have wings. It's a flightless, massive red dragon. And the way you fight it is like a siege. And basically you follow it along like a big canyon, and you do damage, try and drop rocks on it and do as much damage as possible. And then later on they sort of tweak the fight, so you fight it at the gates to a castle, and you kind of scale things and you could fight it directly. It's interesting, but very much an old, kind of outdated type of fight. And the subspecies is pretty much the regular vanilla fight, which is I think lower on the list here. It's just a different color, and it's a little bit more damaging. So Ashen Lao Shenlong, the subspecies, is not terribly interesting to me. Doing that one back in the day, it was just a palette swap, essentially, with some slight tweaks. The original one, as a concept, is going to rate higher. And the original... Where is the original? I believe the original's in here somewhere. Red Dragon says, oh, I see my favorite monster. Yeah, we'll get to your favorite monster for sure. Should be down here in the 5th gen tier list. Also of note, for folks who might not know Monster Hunter too well, there are several classifications of creatures in the game. There is a regular species, there's a subspecies, which is usually a different colored and different model, different element version of the same creature. So you might have Giganox and then Baleful Giganox as its subspecies. You have rare species, which is a really specific superpowered version of the monster classification that usually has its own unique mechanics. So a rare species would be Abyssal Lagiacrus or Molten Tigrex. Sometimes they have different elements or just super powered up attacks that separates them from a subspecies, which usually flips the element around or adds something different. Rare species are very uncommon, hence the name. There's only been 3 or 4, maybe 5 in total if you count both Wraths. But rare species are in here, subspecies are in here, variants are also in here. A variant is like a super-powered version of a regular species that's different from a rare. They usually are modeled differently and have different attacks, and they're just classified as different than a rare species. A lot of their attributes are kind of synonymous, but they're classified differently. So a rare or variant species would be something like Savage Deviljho. It's not a subspecies because its element doesn't change, and it's not rare because it's not part of a super exclusive secret tier of super monsters. It's just a regular Deviljho on crack. And so this one's considered a variant. I think Scarred Young Garuga is considered a variant as well. And then the last classification unique to Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate are Deviants. Deviants are basically a superclass of monsters unique to those games that have very different attacks as a result of evolution and surviving hunts with encounters with hunters. And that gives you things like Dread King Rathalos, Deadeye Young Garga, Drill Tusk Tetsucabra. Those were unique to Generations and Generations Ultimate, but they're also separate. So we'll see those as part of the mix here. So basically 4 different classifications, and we're all going to be ranking them based on the rules. Design, experience, and not factoring the gear that these creatures create. So with that in mind, we'll move on. Next up is a monster that we haven't seen since Freedom Unite, and has not been in any of the recent games. This is Hypnocotris. Hypnocotris is a bird-type wyvern, and this one came from Frontier. It was a crossover monster. Freedom Unite might have been the first time it showed up. Maybe Base Freedom. I started with Freedom Unite, and this monster was in there as a G-rank creature. Hypnoc is cool. It's kind of ostrich looking, has a long sort of spiky beak and bright plumage, but its gimmick is that it puts you to sleep. It's very aggressive, and by breathing out this sort of mist, similar to Baggy or Somnicanth in the recent games, but very agile, very quick, and it's got a pretty cool feel to the fight. The reason why we haven't seen Hypnoc in other games is because, like I've mentioned in previous streams, when the mainline Monster Hunter team brought over Frontier monsters, they did it with Lavasiath, which is somewhere on the list here. Maybe it's down in the World or Iceborne tier. They did it with the Lava Fish, and they did it with Hypnoc. And when they brought those 2 out of Frontier, which was the PC MMO type Monster Hunter game we didn't get in the West, the Frontier community got really mad. They were very vocal and yelled at Capcom because they felt like their exclusive roster was being shared outside of their little club. And as a result, Capcom didn't bring over any more monsters from Frontier. And that has all changed with the inclusion of Espinas, the poster boy of the early Frontier series, in Sunbreak. So now there's no longer this need of appeasement. Hey, Wazzy's here. Wazzy says, ranking hieroglyphics, neat. Sure do love some Anubis and cat combos. Well, there are cats. There's one right here. There's another one. So Hypnoc and Lavasiath fall in this category of crossover monsters, and they never did it again. They brought plenty of console title monsters over to Frontier, but never the reverse because of that big backlash from the community, which is really dumb, but it is what it is. Wally says, what's your favorite hieroglyphics? I really like the design of scarabs, which you can see, and I don't know if they're part of the actual hieroglyphic writing system, but they're very common in Egyptian art. Scarab designs are really cool. Very ornate, neat looking bugs. Alright. We'll continue on. We're in 3rd gen monsters. I'll try and call out what generation we're in because it's going to jump back and forth. These ones have to be 2nd generation, 1st or 2nd. Abyssal Lagiacrus, the first rare species, is definitely 3rd generation. This is Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate from 3DS and Wii U. And this one, we'll see the regular Lagiacrus down in the list somewhere. Basically, it's a big sea serpent leviathan creature. And the rare species you fight completely underwater and has these crazy whirlpool vortex and lightning attacks. It's an incredibly difficult fight, but has some of the coolest gear and has these bright glowing crystal parts of its body that light up as it generates static current. Very cool monster. Going up here on A tier, Abyssal Lagi is really neat. Probably won't see it until they bring back water combat, which hopefully they don't. Pink says, I thought it was a variant. I thought the regular one had yellow bits. Logi doesn't have a variant. The original Lagiacrys, the flagship of Tri in third generation, has a base species, a subspecies, and a rare. There's just 3 different types. We will see the subspecies. Where is Ivory? Ivory Logi. I know I saw it when I was looking through this list earlier. Might be buried somewhere in the middle. I know one list that I did do outside of streams. Oh, here he is. All right. Abyssal Logi is here. Or, sorry. Ivory Logi's here. The base species for this monster is somewhere else in here. It's blue. It's darker blue. Let's see. Again, this isn't in encounter order, which would have been nice, but that's fine. There's so much information here to expect the creator of the tier list to put these in like a chronological order would be bananas. That would be a lot of work. Here's Ivory. The regular one's got to be in here. It's a very iconic monster. One that people really want back for current generation, but does not perform correctly in... Oh, here. It doesn't perform correctly with the engine. That's why they haven't added it. Wazzy had asked further up, can a Monster Hunter monster be shiny? And do they have a better name than Monster Hunter Monster? Funny you ask, because there's actual classifications of different species of monster. I see Iconic Redeemed a Hydrate. Kind of like you have taxonomies and different families of classification. There are species that all of these creatures fit under that are established in the Monster Hunter universe. So the types of creatures, first of all, pretty much everything in Monster Hunter is considered a wyvern as like a basic species up at the top. But again, there's some exceptions. But most things that are reptilian are considered wyverns, even though they're not, necessarily a 2-legged winged animal. It's just sort of like the species designation. And I'm just looking at the chat. I'll try and explain how the classification works, Wazzy. It'll probably make more sense. You about to tell me that's not just a shiny variant? Well, what tends to affect how things are classified is what they actually do, not necessarily how they look, which is the difference. In Pokemon, shiny is the different color palette, different color of the creature. In Monster Hunter, the different classifications are designated based on what they do. So a subspecies usually has a different elemental attack type. Not necessarily every case like Ivory and Regular. We'll talk about that. But a variant tends to have different attacks, but not necessarily a different element. It's weird. But for the sake of the ranking, it won't really matter, because all it matters is my opinions on these for the sake of placing them. So next up we have Baleful Giganox. This is a subspecies of regular Giganox right here. And Giganox is a flying type wyvern. It's like a big leech or remora type creature. It doesn't have eyes. It senses things using heat and crawls on the walls, and debuted in 3rd generation. Subspecies is from 3 Ultimate. And subspecies uses thunder or electricity element. And Baleful's okay. I'd say it's pretty kind of middling in design. It's kind of got bright neon colors. I like its design palette more than its actual fight, but it's pretty mid-tier. The original Giganox is more interesting to me because it's kind of more distinct, and this was a very unusual monster. So if we segue into regular Giganox, this one is poison. The subspecies deals electricity or thunder, but the regular version has a poison element, so it will spit different types of venom at you and inflict poison. And Giganox is neat. I do like this monster. I'm putting it up here on upper B. We have not seen this one since 3rd generation, which is a shame. A lot of people compare it to the big penis monster Kezu, which is somewhere in here. They're probably cousins, species-wise, but Giganox always seemed more interesting to me because it had a bit more of a distinct look to it, and its fight was more interesting. Wazzy says, fun fact. Oh, yeah, and I know Pink likes Giganox. I'm sure Pink put Giganox on S tier. Wazzy says, fun fact, both bits in my fire icons is the same fire. Oh, I'm assuming you made them. And Wazzy says, Kezu's my favorite because I don't know anything about Monster Hunter. Well, maybe I'll learn something today. All right. Now let's get to another. This is the first official flagship entry here. This is Lagiacrus, the base version. Lagiacrus as the flagship monster of 3rd generation. Again, Leviathan type. So kind of like a sea serpent. Long body, 4 legs, found in aquatic environments. Uses electricity. Very cool monster, but probably not one we'll see until maybe the next generation if they find a way to retool its moveset, since it was primarily designed to be fought in the water. But it's really iconic and neat in design, and its fight was decently fun too. So I'm going to put Lagi up on S tier. I like that monster. It's cool. Deconfirm for Sunbreak, but hopefully in the future. Pink says, underwater combat, come back, please. Only if they do it better. I didn't like underwater combat on Tri and 3U. It was just clunky. Again, if you played 3U and you did underwater combat with dual analog sticks, consider yourself lucky. If you played on 3DS and you did underwater combat without 2 analog sticks, it was miserable. And some weapons perform better underwater than others. And if you had a weapon whose moveset underwater sucked, it was rough. It was very difficult. But you never know. They could bring it back and do it better. The subspecies, this is Ivory Lagiacrus. It's got a lighter blue body and dark blue horns. Different color palette, and its moveset is more akin to a land-based encounter. So it doesn't have a different element for a subspecies, which is rare, uncommon, but it does play differently, has a different moveset. Ivory is cool. I'm going to put it probably towards the mid part of B tier. I really like the color palette, and the fight is fine, but not necessarily as iconic to me as the original flavor, and not as bonkers as far as movesets go with the rare species. So it looks like we're going through all of 3rd generation for a good chunk of this, and there'll be some stuff that probably refers back to later games but started in the older ones. We have Barroth. Barroth is a brute type wyvern and also debuted in 3rd generation. Barroth is an early game target. It's a big, heavily armored monster that forces new players to learn how to deal with fast things. It will charge you, run you over. It coats its body in mud like armor and can fling mud to inflict the mud status. It's definitely got more tricks than some of the early game, fight a dinosaur targets. And so Barroth is fine. Probably lower B tier. Has this neat effect where when it charges, it has nostrils on the top of its crown here, and they'll expel steam, so it sounds like a train whistle, and then it'll promptly run you over. Barroth is fine. Next up, we have another Elder Dragon. This is one of the endgame targets of Tri and Tri Ultimate. Or mid-game? Mid-ish game, I think. This is Sadeas. Sadeas is a giant whale dragon. And you fight it entirely underwater. It's got a really long, kind of Leviathan-like body. It looks a lot like a whale. It has these big horns and a big furry beard. And you kind of fight it like Lao Shan Lung up here, in that you follow it along an underwater, completely flooded cave, and you kind of beat on it, do some damage, and then you get to the end, you fight it directly. And it's a pretty big size and scale fight, and difficult because it's, again, underwater. But Sadeas is cool. I'm going to put you in upper B tier. Very unique design. There's a subspecies of this one we'll see, I think, later on. I'd be surprised if it wasn't on here, but we shall see when we get there. Which is basically a harder version of that fight. Yeah, here you are, Goldbeard. Yeah, neat monster and a really cool theme. It's this kind of Monster Hunter language, almost operatic theme with vocals that plays. Fink says, "Be right back. I will come back in a bit and hassle you on your taste." All right. We'll keep trucking along. You'll be able to see where I've ranked a lot of stuff when you come back, so I will catch you later. Next up, we have subspecies of third generation creature. This is Crimson Kurapeko. The regular version of Kurapeko is down here. I'm gonna start grouping these together if I see them on the list, just to keep things simple. Crimson Kurapeko, you're gonna go up here on high C tier. The base species of monster, it's gonna go higher. In fact, we'll rank them both. Regular Kurapeko, I'm putting higher in B tier. This is a smaller target. It's a bird with kind of a big trumpet-like beak and a big throat pouch, and got these bright, flashy, flamboyant colors. And the base version has flints on its wings that can strike and make sparks. And it basically flies around and it runs you over, but it can use its trumpet, beak, and throat pouch to do songs. And the songs that it sort of calls out do different things. Some will buff it. Some, in later games, buff the enemies around it. And one thing it can also do is it can mimic the cries or roars of monsters in the area. So this sort of unassuming troll bird becomes a big threat later in the game as more dangerous targets wander around the map. And the Crimson version it does the same thing, but it has thunder element instead of fire. And what I remember from playing the old games is you'd be fighting later in high rank usually, and you're beating on this bird, which is not really that challenging by itself. And then it'll turn on the trumpet, and it will call a Deviljho. We'll see Deviljho down here, the angry pickle. But the fact that this bird can summon one of the more dangerous monsters in the game mid-fight makes it a pretty big threat. And it was always sort of a game of, okay, make sure you interrupt it when it starts singing, because it's either going to heal or buff itself, or call Deviljho. And you do not want this guy right here showing up to ruin your day. We'll talk about Deviljho later. One of my favorite monsters. But yeah, Kurapeko's fun. They should bring this one back, just so people can experience the horror of having something really unpleasant get summoned mid-fight. Hey, Sour Lad's here. What's up, Sour Lad? We are talking about Monster Hunter monsters. And potentially getting canceled over bad opinions. Next up, we have another monster that debuted in Portable 3rd, which is technically 3rd generation, I believe. This is Duramboros. And Duramboros This one is Fanged Beast, I think, in classification. This one has not been seen since 4U. I don't know if this one is in Generations or Generations Ultimate. It's been a while. But not in current generations. Actually, no, this is a Brute type Wyvern. Not a Fang Beast. Brute Wyvern. Duramboros is really cool. What a fun monster. Putting you up here on B tier. It's basically a big, mossy, herbivore-looking quadruped. It's got short arms, so it only walks on 2 legs, kind of like a big dinosaur. It's got 2 big humps on its back and big sort of bull-like horns on its face and a big club tail. And it sort of attacks by trying to run you over with charges, and it'll swing its tail around and can cause tremor status when it hits the ground. But the thing about Duramboros that's fun is when it gets mad, it'll start spinning in a circle to hit things around it. And it'll start spinning faster and faster to the point where it generates enough force to physically lift off the ground like a helicopter, and it will either fly straight up and try and land on you, or it'll fly across the arena and land on you. And seeing something that massive get airborne is one of the most visually striking things in a Monster Hunter game. The first time I saw it, it threw me because I was like, this is this big dumb herbivore looking thing, and then it starts spinning around like a ballerina and then whoop, straight in the air. Very awesome monster, a lot of fun. Iconic says, oh, imagine we get Wazi to rank Monster Hunter monsters with Raku's input like Wazi did with Animal Crossing villagers with Pink. Well, I'm sure Wazi would have trouble ranking things just based on knowing nothing about the series, so she could only rank them based on what the icons look like. But the tier list itself, let's see. I'm going to put this in chat. I think if I do this, it'll post the link and you folks can download your own and do your own ranking. I know Red Dragon has played Monster Hunter before. I don't know about Iconic or Sour, but you could also do your own. So let me test this link real quick. Okay, I'm gonna put this in chat. If you want to take a stab at it, feel free. Wazi says, I'm really good at making fun of things I don't understand. So there you go. If you want to try and rank Monster Hunter monsters as a person who doesn't play the games, feel free. I need to send this to Matt too, since he plays the games. Pink already did one. They sent me theirs earlier. So it's fun to compare. You know, everyone's got a favorite and least favorite. But let's move on. Next up, we have another Leviathan type. This is a non-aquatic Leviathan. And let's do it like this. If I can find the original species, with the exception of some in here, I will move them together and we'll do them at the same time. That way I don't have to jump back and forth. Unless they're showing up like further down here in the games, which is going to be a couple specific cases. But this is Agnaktor. Agnaktor is a lava-dwelling Leviathan. It lives in a volcano, has a long sort of Leviathan-like body like the others, and it burrows underground into the molten terrain, covers itself with lava like an armor, and the longer it's above ground, the more the armor hardens and becomes difficult to hit. Your weapons will bounce off and you have to wait till it resubmerges or use like a fire-type weapon to heat it up. And then it's got these different beams of heat energy it can spew at you. Also, really fun. I like Agnaktor. It's got a lot of personality. I'm going to put you up on... I'm going to say under Duramboros here. This one has not been seen in a game for a long time. We have an Almudron subspecies in Sunbreak, which kind of fulfills the fire element Leviathan role. So a lot of people are saying it deconfirms this one in the future, but we'll see. It's a neat monster. Fun fight. Really cool design. its subspecies, Glacial Agnactor down here, Iconic says, the only monster I know is the Gobel. Gobel's right here. We'll get to you next. Glacial Agnactor is logically found in frozen tundra type terrain. It has ice armor instead of lava armor and has a different moveset, but it functions very similar to its regular cousin. The neat mechanic about Glacial Agnactor is that it pops out of the ground and it's covered in ice armor instead of lava, and rather than have it harden over time, its armor thaws the longer it's above ground, and every time it burrows underneath the surface, it rehardens its ice armor. So you want to keep it above ground so that it becomes easier to hit, versus the other one, it gets harder to hit the longer it's above ground. So I'm going to put Glacial on lower B tier. It's got a really neat sort of mix of blue palettes, light colors. Iconic says, harden. Yeah, if you're using a weapon, you will not get good penetration while the monster is hardened. You have to make sure and soften it up. Moving on, we have Gobel. This one is also considered a Leviathan, even though it doesn't have the long body like a lot of the other ones. It's a big, amphibious puffer / angler fish. And this monster is unique. There hasn't been another one designed this way since 3rd generation. And its moveset was primarily meant to function underwater, kind of like Logi. But it was neat. You fight it in sort of a flat, almost flounder-like anglerfish with a lantern over its head. And it would try and bite you underwater. It could sort of inhale you, and it would try and chomp on you underwater as well, or flash you for stun. But when you made Gobel angry, it would inflate its body like a pufferfish, and dozens of these quills that are normally flat would just spike out everywhere. And then it would try and run you over in its big inflated state. And it could do this out of the water as well. So try and steamroll you, a big spiky pincushion. And its tail had spines that could deal poison, I believe. Poison or paralysis. I like Gobel. It's a monster with a lot of personality. So I'm going to put you kind of in the middle of B tier. We've not seen this one since 3 Ultimate, I believe. Oh, forgot my Small Raku timer was off. It's been off for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You guys just got a whole bunch of free small time. But we'll restore everything to normal. I'm sure Iconic just didn't remind me because he forgot. Moving on. This is the subspecies for Sadius, Goldbeard. This is a similar version of the fight underwater, but I believe this one might only be fought in the final direct encounter, and it is a much tougher fight. It could use some stronger attacks, like the regular Sadius up here has a big water beam that can use to sweep the entire arena. Goldbeard would do that more often, get multiple beams. And it does have a pretty cool color palette, so I'm going to put it up here on high C. Fight's not too different, but it does look neat. Some of the subspecies we see will fall into the mid-tier category if they don't do anything that interesting, versus ones that do flip the fight around, add a new element, or change the gameplay a lot. Those get bumped up much higher. So we'll see as the different subspecies get ranked. Some are going to be pretty mid to lower, and some are going to be pretty fun. There's going to be a decent spread. Case in point, subspecies for Nargacuga. This is green Nargacuga. 3rd generation debut, I think 3 Ultimate, I want to say. Or Portable 3rd, I don't remember which game this one came out in. But this subspecies brings nothing new to the table other than a different color palette and maybe one or two different moves, it is very uninteresting. So green Nargacuga is going to go down on D tier, which kind of sucks to do because base Nargacuga is my favorite monster in the series, but the subspecies is boring. They would need to retool this one and make it a lot more interesting. So you're going on D tier. Color palette's okay. I like the way it looks, but it's such a redundant fight. So D tier for you. Speaking of third generation controversial picks, let's talk about Fish. Plesioth. Regular version and its subspecies green Plesioth. This first one is pretty infamous if you played the older games. Plesioth was, I want to say, second or first generation in Monster Hunter. Very old, but it's a big bipedal fish wyvern. You primarily fight it in areas that have water in the older games, and then in 3U, they actually just dropped it into underwater environments, and it played a lot better. But this monster is hated by the community because it notoriously had broken hitboxes. I think its design is really cool. Its color and design is this big fish wyvern. Looks neat, but its fight itself was annoying because it could be visibly far away from it, and its hip check of doom could still hit you because the hitboxes were broken. So people would put this one on F tier, I know, because it's so infamous, but because we're factoring design in as well, Plesioth's going to go C tier. We're going to put you mid C tier. And Red Dragon redeems Small Raku again. Okay. Back to the desk. And Iconic, since you redeemed the last one, you're responsible for telling me when the timer comes up if I don't see it. Alright. Plesioth, the controversial take here for old school Monster Hunter players, is putting this one on the mid tier, primarily driven by design. Now, its subspecies, Green Plesioth, suffers from the same issues as Green Narga, in that it is a different color. It does nothing differently other than it's faster and hits a little bit harder. It brings nothing new to the table. And its color palette is okay. It doesn't have a different model, it's just different color. So for that, you're going an F tier because you bring even less to the table than Green Narga. Green Narga's color palette is strikingly different than the base one we'll see later. Green Plesioth doesn't need to be there. It's a waste of a slot. It even has its own tier of gear, which doesn't factor in here, but it accomplishes nothing. So you get kicked down to the bottom, our first F tier monster. Next up, we have the siege encounter of Tri, unrelated to the water-based encounters. So I'm going to lump these two together so we can talk about them. We have Jen Moran, base version and its subspecies. Jen Moran is a giant desert sand whale. It's an elder dragon. It's massive. It's much bigger than a ship. And you fight this thing out in the desert on these sand boats that are kind of coasting through the dunes. And the way you fight this thing is like a siege quest in later Monster Hunter games. You're on this big ship, and you're manning cannons and ballista, and you're shooting at this big sand whale, trying to break pieces off of it and slow it down, while dodging attacks as it tries to hit you with rocks or ram the boat. And eventually, you do enough damage to tick it off, and then it gets up close, and you jump on it. Not necessarily Shadow of the Colossus style, but you jump onto its body and run around and break different parts of it. It was very much an idea they repurposed into Zora Magdaros in World, but much more dynamic and interesting. And then as the fight goes on against Jen, you do enough damage to move into the final showdown phase where your sand boat parks and you're static. and you're facing off against this massive sand whale who starts at a distance and slowly moves towards the boat, and you've got to kill it before it destroys your boat. And so you're fighting it on the ground, kind of smacking its feet, trying to knock it over, smacking it in the head. And it's a really neat fight. Very unique. In Tri, which is where that debuted, it's the first time there was something to that scale, and it was done pretty well. So I'm going to put Jen up here on A tier. Very memorable and iconic fight. You could do it solo, which is much more difficult, or with a group. And everyone has sort of their job. When you're racing through the dunes, shooting at it with cannons, everyone's manning weapons to break parts. And then you have a person who's manning the gong to stun it if it tries to ram the boat. Or when it starts trying to play chicken and ram the boat head on, someone's got to get up at the helm or the front of the boat and hit the big Dragonator harpoon to spear it before it can collide head on. Really neat fight. The subspecies Hallowed Genmoran is pretty much the same fight with some new mechanics. Instead of the regular sort of sand body, it's got these crystal ores all over it, which looks kind of cool. Doesn't dramatically change the formula, but it's still pretty fun and an engaging fight. And it doesn't play out the same way, so you can't use the same strategies. So I'm going to put Hallowed up on upper C. I'm going to put it above Goldbeard. Looks cool, and the fight isn't a carbon copy. It's similar, but not quite as redundant as some of the other ones we'll see in the list here. So we'll put that there. And here we have Barroth subspecies. This is also a 3rd generation creature that debuted. The regular Barroth up here you encounter in the desert. Jade Barroth you encounter in the tundra. It's an ice subspecies. And while the regular version uses ice armor, or mud armor, this one covers itself in ice, and its charging patterns were different. It's a more difficult fight and behave differently than the original. I think it was more difficult and engaging, so I'm going to put Jade 1 tier higher than its original. All right, that was a fast 5 minutes. I'll put everything back. Thanks for reminding me, Iconic. Pink has returned. Pink says, I'm glad you put Kurapeko at a high level. Oh yeah, the troll bird and its threat. Definitely cemented up here. I wish they would bring Kurapeko back. They could do so much fun stuff with the more dangerous monsters they've got now. Like, you're fighting this thing and it summons a Basil Geese or something like that. All right, let's move on. We have another rare species. And I gotta look through the list because Nargacuga has a bunch of different species. We'll get to deviants down here. We rank the subspecies, and the base one is... Where's the base one? Did they include it in the Rise tier or the World tier? Where's my boy? Here. Okay. Here's the. We'll get to you later. This is the rare species for Narga that was recently announced as a title update for Sunbreak. This is Lucent Nargacuga. Lucent Nargacuga is really neat. I'm putting you above Loggy Abyssal on A tier. Regular Nargacuga, for those who don't know Monster Hunter, is this jet black kind of panther owl bird wyvern. It's very fast and stealthy and has these blades on its wings. And it's a pretty aggressive fight that forces you to learn patterns. It's my favorite monster in this series. Lucent, as a rare species, is a bigger, stronger version that can also inflict poison. And this thing turns invisible. So not only is it fast and hits hard, but it'll occasionally just blink out of existence and go invisible. It'll break your sight lock so you can't lock onto it, and then it'll be jumping all over the place, and you have to kind of pay attention to the little dust clouds on the ground as it moves, and it'll basically go predator mode. Very cool monster, and one we haven't seen since 3U. And its gear, again, not factoring in the tier list, its gear with endgame meta, very strong. And now people get to experience this thing in Sunbreak in the first DLC coming out in August. Very cool monster. A lot of people who've been playing the games for a while were losing their minds when they announced Lucent. I'm looking forward to getting smoked by that thing again. You fight it in a unique location too, like an ancient tower arena. A Forlorn Arena is what they're calling it. You're basically stuck in here in a contained environment with this invisible ninja wyvern. Very cool. Next up, we have another 3rd generation monster. And where is... Here we go. We'll put these two together. The icons are from different games, but this is Royal Ludroth and Ludroth subspecies. Royal Ludroth is a Leviathan type, usually designated as an early game target, and it's a big, frilled-necked sponge creature. It's got this big puffy membrane of sponge around its neck that it uses to absorb water, and functions pretty much like an early game target, and it'll run you over. It can spit water. Its innate element is water. It'll try and run you over. In Tri, you fought it underwater. But in all the other games, you fight it on land, and it's not really that difficult of a fight. As an early game target, I'm going to put Ludroth on C tier. I like the way it looks. It's pretty neat looking monster, and it has a really cool roar too. It doesn't factor into the tier list here, but this particular creature's roar is like a mix of like a bird screech, and it's very unusual. But a lot of personality for an early game target. Its subspecies, Purple Ludroth, is fought much later in whatever respective games it shows up in, and takes the original moveset and adds a dangerous poison element to it. This thing can poison you really easily just by splashing around. Pretty dangerous, and its color palette is decent. I'm going to put you on low C tier. If it wasn't for the color palette, this one might not rank decently high because the fight, aside from poison, is pretty much the same. But purple's cool. I can respect having a good color palette. Again, I'm going to try and group together regular and subspecies so we can talk about them at the same time. This was before I started doing that. We've got Rust Duramboros. If the regular version is sort of like a forested jungle creature you fight, Rust Duramboros is desert. You fight this one in dry, arid environments. It doesn't really do a whole lot differently, but it looks different, and its tail is shaped like an axe instead of a club. It functions by trying to run you over, and it can still do the same spinning helicopter move as the other one. Doesn't bring a lot to the table, so I'm going to put you lower here in C tier. Iconic says, ah yes, poison, also known as hurt juice. We will definitely see some monsters in this tier list that heavily rely on poison as their main mechanic and are dangerous as a result. Lucent is one. Giganox is another one. If you don't have antidotes, you're in a whole world of trouble. Okay. Next up, we're continuing along 3rd generation monsters. We've got Sanbarioth, subspecies of regular Barioth, which must be down here. There you are. We will rank these two together. There is a variant for Barioth we'll get to further down. I think it's got to be in the Iceborne tier. Yeah, over here. But regular Barioth is an ice element wyvern. A Red Dragon says, well, it's 1:30 a.m. I'm going to lay down. night all. All right, Red Dragon. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out. Hope you have a good evening. Feel free to fill out your own Monster Hunter tier list since you played the games, and send it to me on Twitter or in Discord. I'd be interested to hear opinions. So you fight Barioth, the regular version, in the tundra. It's ice element. It's like a big saber-toothed, tusked flying wyvern. And it's pretty agile. Moves around the arena pretty good, and it'll freeze you if you're not careful. I like Barioth. It's very similar in fight to Narga, but has a couple interesting gimmicks and twists. So I'm going to put Barioth up on upper B tier. They've kind of retooled this monster's fight. In 3rd generation, it was decently challenging. When they brought it back for Iceborne, I believe it was Iceborne, not Base World, they made it very difficult, and they gave it an even more difficult variant. And then in Rise, they sort of toned Barioth back down, so it's still kind of a mid-tier challenge. Its subspecies, Sand Barioth, you fight in the desert, and it has similar sort of pouncing, jumping, agile attacks, but instead of being able to spit ice and summon these kind of ice cyclones, it summons regular desert cyclones, and it can use the big tornadoes as kind of like a momentum mechanism to whip itself around the arena. Pretty cool monster. Doesn't switch the formula too much, but it's enough to be a fun fight, and we haven't seen this one since 3rd generation and maybe GU. I can't remember if this one was in Generations Ultimate. Pretty cool monster. Next up, we've got, which one is this? This is the subspecies for Uragaan. Uragaan must be in the world tier. There you are. Talking about 3rd generation monsters again. Base species Uragaan is a brute type. A heavily armored brute type that lives in volcanic environments. It's got these ore-like armor deposits all over its body, and it could expel like a explosive gas, and it could roll up into like a roly-poly ball and steamroll you at pretty high speeds. I think Uragaan is fine. It's kind of a mid-tier monster for me, but not so mid that I would put it super low. So probably upper C tier. It's shown up in a bunch of games. They retooled its moveset for Iceborne. It was in World/Iceborne. Not bad. Its subspecies, Steel Uragaan, I think has a cooler palette. It's kind of a more metallic, silvery blue pattern. The regular one's kind of gold, which is fine. Steel Uragaan's main gimmick is instead of explosions and kind of volcanic things, it was really stinky. It had these things it could drop that instead of exploding like the regular version would hit you with soiled status, so they're basically fart rocks. And as a result, it was much more dangerous. Because in Monster Hunter, if you get farted on and you hit soiled status, you can't heal. It's an anti-heal debuff. So Steel is obnoxious more than anything else. And aside from its color palette being okay, I don't find this monster terribly interesting. So you're going in... I'm going to put you in low C tier. If it wasn't for the color palette, this one would be in D tier for sure. So we'll go low C tier. Pink says farts and reverb. Yeah, there's some monsters in here that are pretty stinky. We'll get to you. We'll get to you later. There is a deviant for Uragaan down here. We'll deal with that one with the rest of the deviants. Next up, we have another older generation monster that has not shown up in recent games as a new sort of reworked creature. It was in Generations and Ultimate. This is Akantor. A Cantor, weirdly enough, is classified as a flying wyvern, even though it doesn't have wings. And this thing's big. It's a very large target, like Elder Dragon sized. And it's a big, volcanic, heavily armored creature with these big fangs, like tusks. And you fight it in its own contained arena, and on like a volcanic field. And it attacks by kind of burrowing underground and trying to come up under you. It could shoot this huge sweeping wind tunnel like roar. Pretty difficult fight that I think they could retool and build on for current games. I really like a Cantor. It's a cool creature, so it's gonna go up here in A tier. Very aggressive, very dangerous monster. And the fact that it has its own dedicated arena is pretty neat. I would be willing to bet we would see this one in DLC for Sunbreak. We'll see if I'm right. As a cousin too, might as well rank it. It's not a subspecies, but it's a cousin. Similar type of creature. This is Ukanlos. Ukanlos is like the ice version of a Cantor. Similar type of fight in its own arena, but its moveset's very different. It could burrow underground, but it would, instead of just trying to come up at your feet like a Cantor, Ukanlos would kind of shark style break its fin through the ice and make a beeline for you, like Jaws. And it could shoot freezing ice energy, I guess it would be, and you have to deal with a lot more hazards for status for this one. So, because the fights are kind of similar, I'm going to put Ukanlos a little bit lower. I like its design, but not as much as a Cantor. So you're actually going to go in B tier. If they bring these creatures back, they should bring them back in a pair, and then retool the fights, make them a little bit more modern. Pretty cool creatures. Those go back to, I think, 2nd generation. They're a lot older, Monster Hunter. Alright, next up we have 4th gen monsters finally. And we'll group these together. This is Kechawacha and its subspecies, Ash Kechawacha. Kechawacha is a Pelagus type, which usually is reserved for the mammal or primate type creatures. There's several in the list here, like Congalala. We'll get to you, stinky boy. And some other ones like Rajang. Rajang is the same species classification as Kechawacha. Wazzy says, Ash Ketchum? It's funny you mentioned that. The Ash Kechawacha subspecies was used in an animation done by NCH. There's a dude from Indonesia or Singapore who does fan animations and stuff. And he created a complete recreation of the Pokemon opening with Monster Hunter creatures instead of people and Pokemon. And the main character, instead of Ash Ketchum, was Ash Kechawacha because it's a pun. And it's really neat animation. I suggest you go look it up. I think it's called Poke Monster Hunter or something like that. But it's like a scene-by-scene recreation that he animated himself using this creature as the main character. But the base version, Kechawacha, is water element. It's a medium target. It looks kind of like a lemur. And has these big floppy ears that it uses to hear. And then when it's threatened, it'll fold its ears over its face like a protective mask. And has these long arms with hooks like talons it can use to kind of swing from things. Early game monster, but a lot of personality. And has kind of like a long tapir like trunk. So it's like an elephant, lemur, monkey, spits water. I like Kechawacha. It's a pretty interesting design and memorable monster. So we're gonna say B tier. Put you right kind of tied with Giganox. We have not seen that monster since 4th generation. Might have been in GU. Its subspecies, the Ash Kechawacha, is a similar version of the fight, but it's fire element. And the shape and pattern of its ears are different. And its body and color palette are different. And it's kind of an interesting twist on the fight. I'm going to say low B tier for this one. I like the design of Ash Ketchwacha better than the fight. It doesn't do a ton different other than its element, but it is a cool monster. Pink says, I love weird monkey elephant. Yeah, Ketchwacha's got a lot of personality. It'd be cool if they brought that one back in a future game. Next up, we have another 4th generation monster that has been absent from the games since GU and its debut in 4 and 4U. This is Tetsucabra. Tetsucabra is an amphibian type, which is the first we've seen so far. Yep. And amphibian types tend to be kind of frog-ish shaped, frog or amphibian sort of adjacent. And Tetsucabra is a big frog that has this kind of tusked mouth and spikes, and it's kind of weird, kind of like club-looking tail. And it's an early game target. And the neat thing about Tetsucabra is it has sumo wrestler moves, kind of like Tetranodon, which we'll see later. But it has these stomps and charges and pushes, kind of like a sumo wrestler. That was the inspiration for its design. And it can use its jaw to pick up big rocks and create obstacles or kind of crush them in front of you for damage. It's a neat monster, early game target, but we have not seen this one in a long time. And with Rise being like a Japanese aesthetic with yokai, I'm surprised this one didn't get brought back. But Tetsucabra's cool. We're going to put you up here on B tier. Its subspecies, this is Berserk Tetsucabra. Pretty much the same thing with fire explosive rocks. Not too different in fight. Very strikingly different green and orange color palette. I'm going to put you on C tier. Maybe below Purple Ludroth. Iconic says, be right back, gonna eat. Alright, dude. We'll be at this for a little bit. I'm hoping I can do this in under 3 hours. Still have a ton of monsters to talk about. But yeah, Tetsucabra and its different species are cool. It's got a variant or a deviant down here. We'll get to that. Hey, Potato's here. What's up, Potato? Potato says, where's my big boy Barroth on this ranking list? Regular Barroth is up here on mid to lower B tier. I ranked Barroth subspecies Jade Barroth higher because I like it more. But Charge Boy is up here. Barroth is good. I like Barroth. Can't wait to get run over by that thing on Master Rank and Sunbreak. Potato says, good. Anywhere less is unforgivable. I'm going to paste a link to this tier list in the chat, Potato. I encourage you to fill out your own as a person who's played the games and send it to me. It's big. It's got small monsters and everything from Gen 1 up through the current gen, but there's a lot to rank. But yeah, send me your thoughts. Pink says, so far your taste isn't terrible, so I can't make fun of you. Oh, don't worry, we'll get there. There's still a lot to cover. All right, let's go back to earlier generations Gravios. Regular Gravios, Black Gravios, its subspecies. Regular Gravios, which is in the older games considered the adult form of Basarios, which we've seen in Rise. Basarios is probably down here. Yeah, right here. Gravios is supposed to be the adult form. They may have retconned that, depending on if they even bring this monster back. Hey, Matt's here. Matt says, Odogaron, Odowaron. We have not gotten to World and Rise yet. Odo's down here. I would probably put Odogaron on high A tier. I will see if I remember that by the time I get there. But This one will rank high. I like Odogaron. I hope it comes back. Potato says, Barroth is my favorite to kill. I don't know if you saw me paste the link to the tier list, Matt. But feel free to fill it out. Potato says, Barroth is my favorite to kill. Tobi Kadachi is my actual favorite monster, though. Well, that's cool. I like Tobi. Tobi's down here. That's a World 5th Gen debut. We'll be ranking it using its Rise icon. But getting back to Gravios. This is a flying type wyvern, a big, bulky rock type wyvern you fight in the volcanic area. Gravios in the older games is pretty simple in fight. It tries to run you over and swat you with its tail, and can expel explosive gas, fire, kind of like Uragon. But its main weapon is its breath. It can shoot a big focused heat beam of energy that was very dangerous. This monster could be brought back and retooled, and I think it'd be a much more interesting fight. So I'm going to put Gravios on upper C tier. I like its design. I think its fight's okay, but it's not terribly interesting. Pink says, I like when fanged wyverns that look very lupin. Big cat have, snake faces. So like synapsid type creatures. That's the main style design for Tobi. And a lot of the fanged wyverns. That's a term, right? That goes back to dinosaurs, I think. It's a synapsid. Yeah. Synapsids were the main body type design for things like Tobi, Gyros, Odo, a lot of those. Now, Black Gravios is a subspecies. It doesn't have a different element. It's still fire. It has this really cool kind of burnt dark color scheme, but this thing's a pain to fight. It likes to fly and shoot laser beams of deadly heat energy everywhere. It's really obnoxious compared to the original. So I'm putting Black Gravios down here on D tier. A little bit higher because I like its color palette. Everything else about it is really obnoxious and not terribly interesting. They make the regular one a good fight. They don't need to bring its subspecies back. All right. Next up, we have one of the iconic monsters of old school titles. This is Yan-Kut-Ku, also known as the first tutorial monster of older games. A bird-type wyvern, Yan-Kut-Ku is kind of a medium-sized target. It's got a beak, these big sort of floppy ears, and it's kind of the introduction to how the wyvern types interact and how they feel as a hunt. It's meant to teach people the basics and how you can't just sit there and spam attack buttons in Monster Hunter. You'll get rolled. But it's also got kind of a goofy look to it. It's considered one of the big mascots of the series. Yan-Kut-Ku is great. I'm going to put you up on high B tier. Its inclusion in games is always sort of a given and has not been seen since Generations and Generations Ultimate, I believe. But it's not a challenging fight by any means. It's meant to ease people into what Monster Hunter combat's like. But it's been kind of part of the series since way back, probably going back to the first installment. So yeah, you go up there. It's a beloved monster in the franchise. It also eats Khonchus. These things, the little roly-polies from 4th generation that knock you over, and they suck. So anything that eats those is good in my book. Yan-Kut-Ku's subspecies, Blue Yan-Kut-Ku, falls in the same trope as Green Narga. It is a palette swap that's a little bit tougher and faster. It does nothing interesting. So you're not getting the benefit of being iconic and beloved in the series. You're going down here in D tier. And speaking of not beloved, Cephadrome. This is another Piscine type wyvern. Same species as Plesioth up here. And Cephadrome is pretty much just a less interesting version of that fight. It's a kind of hammerhead shark looking wyvern you fight in the desert. It will burrow around, spit water at you, try and knock you over, and is a giant nuisance. This is one of the worst monsters in the entire series, and nobody likes it because it's annoying. It doesn't have good gear, which doesn't factor in. Its fight's not fun. It doesn't look cool. F tier. Cephadrome blows. I've never seen anyone defend this monster. Let's see. Next up, from 4th generation, Pink says it's just a weird brown sand wormfish. Exactly. It's the Plesioth fight at a smaller scale with nothing else interesting about it. Yeah, Cephadrome sucks. Next up we've got... Okay, we're going to group these together. We've got the flagship of Monster Hunter 4. Not 4U, just base 4. This is Gore Magala. One of the coolest monsters in the entire series, in my opinion. Gore Magala is technically an Elder Dragon, though story-wise they don't classify it as an Elder Dragon because they don't know what it is in the story. Pink says, I never liked Gore. Oh, that's a shame. This monster is super fun to fight and just really neat in design. Its design is partially inspired by the Xenomorph from the Alien franchise. And then basically it's this big dragon-shaped creature that has these scales that inflict a virus called Frenzy. And the scales also help it see because it doesn't have eyes. It's blind. It senses things using its wings. And it's got these folded horns on its face that flip out when it gets mad. And really cool fight. I'm looking forward to fighting this thing in Sunbreak after all these years. It's been absent from any recent titles. It was in Generations and Generations Ultimate. But super cool monster. Going up here on S tier. Can't wait to see how upset people get fighting that thing, because it's not easy. Pink says, fight me. You're not required to like everything here. It's fine. The fact that it's got like Xenomorph references is really neat too, since I like Xenomorphs. Oh, the evolved form should be on here. Doesn't need to be ranked at the same time, but where... Huh. I guess we'll see if it comes up. Wazzy says, Raku, defend your opinions. Fight. I did. Maybe the evolved form's not on here. It might not have an icon in the older games. That could be why. Alright, we'll move on. This is a variant. This one's weird. I can never remember its classification because it's kind of the only creature like this in the entire list. This is Chaotic Gore Magala. We'll treat it like a variant because it's not a subspecies. Basically, Gore Magala is the juvenile form of a creature that goes through an evolution and molting process to become a proper Elder Dragon, which again, I don't see it at first glance on the list here. Oh, there it is. Alright. And its adult form is called Shagaru Magala down here. And unlike Edgy Boy up here, instead of being like a black, kind of cloaked looking creature, Shagaru is this big golden Elder Dragon with a big star-shaped wing pattern. Really cool too. I like this one a lot. But if the juvenile version is interrupted while it's in the process of molting and is stuck in between its young and adult forms, you get this half and half form called Chaotic Gore. And it's basically got a hybrid moveset of the regular version and its adult version, and it's a super high level target. And this one I'm pretty certain we'll see in Sunbreak through the DLC at some point. Gonna rank this one up on mid B tier. It's a fun fight, very different. because it's not like the regular Gore Magala, and it's not like its adult form. It's in between and kind of unique. Well, it says, stop being so submissive and beatboxable. So far, no one's hit me with any super controversial opinions. Like, if you put my favorite monster on F tier, then we'd have some fighting words. But so far, not a lot in S tier. We'll definitely fill it out as we go. But first, we are going to move on to another older monster from the Pelagus family. This is Congalala. Congalala is this big pink hippo gorilla. It's probably the grossest monster in the franchise. I don't think it's the worst fight, but from design and experience, you fight this thing and it's got some armored bits and it'll kind of body slam you, but it also farts on you. It's got a move where it can just straight up fart on you to inflict the anti-heal state. It can fling poo at you, which will do the same thing. It is a gross monster, but I'm not going to put it in D tier. I'm going to put it at the bottom of C tier because I do not like fighting this thing. Its design is okay. It's got a bunch of different animal attributes, which is kind of interesting, but it's gross. And likewise, its subspecies, Emerald Congalala, doesn't do a whole lot differently. It's stronger. It's when it eats things in the environment, it can breathe fire. Go on D tier. And it still farts on you. Let's see, how many more of the old generation monsters we have? There's kind of a bunch scattered throughout here. It's going to be a while before we get to the current gen stuff. We can I'll try and group them together when I see them. But we got another standalone one from 4th generation. This is Darren-Moran. This one is very similar in design and fight to Genmoran up here from 3rd generation. It's a big sand whale you fight in the desert, but its body is more heavily armored. It looks kind of like a drill. Its nose has got this sharp harpoon-like thing, versus Gen has tusks. Darmoran is fine, but it doesn't really switch the formula up too much. It's basically the Gen fight with a couple minor tweaks. So I'm going to put you lower B because I do like its design. It just doesn't, bring a lot new to the table. All right. Next up, we get to talk about the crabs finally. Where is the subspecies for Hermitar? Is the subspecies on the list here? Yep, there you are. All right, before we do this, I'm going to go refill my water bottle real quick. So let's take a brief intermission, the 1.5 hour mark, and I will be back in 1 sec. And we will jump back in. We are not even halfway. That's okay. We will keep plugging along, but I'll be back in 1 second, folks. All right. We are back. Wazzy says, what does Wazzy say? Raku wears Velcro because he can't tie his shoes? That's not true. Raku hides ducks in his closet? I will not confirm or deny. Wazzy says, Raku has never been chosen for organized sports. When I was a larva back on Homeworld, that was actually true. People would fight over not having me on their team because I am very small and not good at sports. So thanks for reminding me about that. The best part was sometimes we would be playing football for, education purposes, and my own teammates would tackle me just because they didn't like me on their team. That was also fun. Free Raku facts from back in the day. Anyway, back to Monster Hunter. Let's talk about crabs. Wazzy says, oh, I didn't see the Raku Factu. Well, there you go, Wazzy. Your free Raku Factu was... Physical education sucked back in the day because I suck at sports. And so I used to get harassed a lot. Hope you wanted a fun fact, because there it is. Wazzy says, I want a better one. Too bad. You'll have to wait till you can redeem another one. I have to be careful which facts I share because some of them are tied to really lengthy stories I want to tell you folks on stream sometime. So I don't want to just spill the beans too soon because it'd be a lot more funny if you hear the whole story for context. But anyway, back to crabs. Old generation Monster Hunter. I don't remember if it was first or second. Pink asks, why is the Factor Demon hour wait? I don't have a lot of facts. If I make the cooldown time too short, people are just going to burn through them all. In fact, I got to go add to my list. Fortunately, you folks are going to start getting Homeworld facts in addition to just facts from my past. Alright, so this is Daimyo Hermitar. I don't remember if this one was first or second generation, but this monster's been around for a while. It's basically a giant clawed hermit crab that uses monster skulls as its armor. So it sticks its butt in skulls. And you can see it wandering around the map with a different type of skull. I think this one is only Monoblos. I actually don't remember, but a monster we'll see on the list later, Monoblos, down here. This one uses its skull as a home. And Hermitar functions by trying to run you over and smack you with its claws or spray you with water. It's kind of a mid-tier target. Not super difficult, but pretty fun. I'm looking forward to fighting this thing in Sunbreak. We've not seen any of the crab-type monsters in current generation games. And now they're coming back. So I'm going to put Hermitar up here on B tier. I'm going to put you below Giganox, the unique monster type. And I'm hoping we see more things that use these crab-type skeletons. These are considered Carpassions. The crab arthropod types are considered the Carpassion family. And there's not a whole lot of them. The subspecies Plum Hermitar is, I think Freedom Unite is when it came out. This is a high tier, higher difficulty subspecies. Plum doesn't do a whole lot differently. It suffers from the tropes of some of these other ones being a little bit redundant. It's got kind of a nice color scheme, so you're going to go mid D tier. It's just more difficult, looks slightly different. And Iconic has returned from dinner. I hope you had a good dinner, Iconic. What did you eat today? Hopefully it was something good. All right. Next up, we've got another Elder Dragon. This is the endgame Elder Dragon of 4U, fourth generation, 4 or 4U. I think 4. I gotta kind of remember what the end boss of 4U was. This is Dalamadur. Dalamadur is a really unique Elder Dragon. Iconic says chimichangas. Ooh, chimichangas are good. I've not had some good chimichangas in a minute. But Dalamadur, this is an Elder Dragon, and it's a big kind of Naga or serpentine Elder Dragon. It's got arms, no legs, and a long snake body, and this thing is like the size of a boat. It's huge. You fight it in a unique arena. It's like a big mountain peak, and this big serpent dragon is basically coiled around the mountain, and you fight it by hitting different parts of its body, running up and smacking it around. You climb on it, kind of like Jen Moran. It's a very unique fight, pretty difficult, but this thing is intimidating and really cool looking. I like Dalamadur a lot, so I'm going to put you up on A tier. They could bring this fight back, and they'd have to retool it a bit for Rise, but definitely neat. I recommend, if you've never played the older games, just look up someone fighting this thing. It's pretty unique. Its subspecies, Shah Dalamadur, I honestly cannot find a difference between it and the regular version. It's stronger, has I think a couple different moves, but it's not super different. But it's got a kind of neat lighter white gold color scheme, which I like a lot. So Shah, you're going to go up here on C tier. Despite not being a huge difference in fight, the fact that it does switch up formula a bit and looks cool. It's going to save it from D tier. All right. Now we're going to move on to bugs. We have not seen any of the Neopterons or bug type insects. There is a separate classification from the Carpathians, the crustacean types. And it's usually winged or insect-like creatures, and that's why they're called Neopterons. And we're going to group these together by normal and subspecies for the sake of simplicity here. Where is the regular versions of Celtis and Celtis Queen? These are the subspecies. Further down? Down here at the bottom. All right. Slide you up here. So first one, we'll do it like this. Regular subspecies, regular subspecies. Celtis. Celtis is this kind of winged cricket beetle-ish type creature. It's small. And this is the male Celtis. Got these long, kind of mantis-like claws. And it's an early game target. It flies around, it can get on the ground, hit you with a defense down, I believe. And kind of nimble, not too difficult. You can usually put one down in a few minutes. They're an early game target. So let's rank these separately, because explaining the mechanics of these creatures kind of involves using the whole set. The desert version looks different, behaves almost identically. Not terribly distinct. So regular Celtis we're going to put here on upper C tier. Desert Celtis looks cool. Not too noteworthy, but we'll put you down here, lower C tier. Now the gimmick to these creatures is they're usually found in pairs, and this is Celtis Queen. Celtis Queen is much larger than the male version. She's kind of like an armored insect dreadnought of a creature. Whereas the little one is the male and is kind of flight-based and nimble and flying around. Celtis Queen has no wings. She can't fly. She's grounded, but she makes up for it by being a tank, essentially. And the base version is water element. Technically water element for both, I think. And Celtis Queen attacks by trying to run you over. She has this big kind of pincer tail she can whip around and smack you with. And she can expel water as like a condensed projectile from her mouth. And that in its own is decently challenging. She's kind of slow. But after you fight her for a bit, she will stop and release pheromones in the form of like a fart cloud that inflicts the anti-heal debuff. But when she does that, she will call a male version from anywhere on the map. It's basically a summon. And once she calls the male Celtus onto the map, she will grab him, stick him on top of her body, and then now you're fighting two. And you're fighting the male and the female as one encounter, essentially. And so the way that works is the female will still wander around on foot, and then the male will be like a mounted turret on top of her body, and he'll try and shoot stuff at you like a turret, or he will pick her up using his wings and fly her around the map at high speed. So whereas the regular Celtus Queen is pretty slow and immobile, once she brings her man into the picture, she's airborne. And now you have a big flying bug tank trying to run you over at high speeds. And if you do enough damage to the queen and she gets low in health, she will stop, pick her man up off her back, smack him around, and then eat them. Or eat him to regain health. She will straight up Black Widow him. And then she'll call another one. She'll call another man. Really neat fight. Celtus Queen is cool. One of my favorite of the bug type monsters. She's going up here on A tier. The idea of having to deal with both the male and the female and keep them from combining forces is pretty neat. Cool design, cool fight, neat monster. The desert version of Celtus Queen looks a bit different. She has this longer, more piercing type tail and a desert color scheme. She calls her man into the fight the same way. The big difference from desert is, unlike the regular one, which will just straight up devour her mate for food, the desert version will lock on, take her man off her back, and then use him like a projectile and just propulsion blast, shoot him like a bullet at you. And if it hits you, it does a ton of damage, and he explodes on impact. The man is instantly vaporized and used as a sonic bullet projectile, which will definitely catch you off guard the first time you see it. And then she'll call another one. Like Pink's saying, it's basically a hydropropulsion yeet. And then man number 2. That alone puts Desert Celtus much higher than other subspecies because the fight's pretty similar, but that alone is pretty amusing. So you're going to go up here on B tier. No one expects to get hit by a flying male bug. All right. Let's talk about raptors. And we're going to do this in one shot. We're going to go 1, 2, where's the third one? 3. Iconic says they never expect it. Yep, that's right. You don't expect to be blasted by someone's boyfriend at high speeds. But that's Monster Hunter. Alright, so these are the dromes. The dromes are a early game target from the older games. They're basically alpha raptors that lead packs of the little raptors around. And they're pretty simple targets. This first one is Gendrome. Gendrome is the raptor of the desert. It's got these long fangs and deals paralysis. Pretty basic, not too difficult. I'm going to go mid-tier in C. Velocidrome is kind of the original model. It doesn't have an innate element, but attacks by controlling its pack. This one is less interesting, so I'm going to drop it slightly lower. We'll put these all in the same tier. These creatures all fulfill the same purpose, really. So I'll put you below Gendrome. Geodrome. This is the one found in an ice environment. Same deal, but it spits ice. Put you in the middle. And then the fourth one is Eodrome. This one's fought in kind of forested or swampy areas. Same deal, controls a pack, but spits poison instead of ice or paralysis. I actually like the way this one looks. It's got a kind of neat crest on its head. The Raptors are pretty basic. The counterparts that we'll see in the later games are right here, so we'll rank them now. Oh, that was Giaprey. My bad. Giaprey are the minions. Geodrome has the thing on its head. In third generation, we got a more sort of fleshed out version of the Raptors in Great Jaggy. Let's see. They're going to be in the Sunrise, or the Monster Hunter Rise tier, but we'll group them together here. Great Jaggy, Great Roggy, and Great Baggy. Where is Baggy? Right here. So the first one, Great Jaggy, is this kind of frilled lizard looking raptor. And this was all in Tri that these debuted, or third generation specifically. Great Jaggy is an early game punching bag, but has quite a bit of personality. Not difficult at all. For one of the first targets of third generation. It fulfilled the role of Yan Kutku as kind of like the tutorial monster, but has a lot of personality. I like Great Jaggy. So you're going up here on B tier. Got low B tier. Roggy has kind of a more poison dart frog look. Got a big throat pouch that can inflate, and it spits poison. So more interesting version of the Eodrome over here. Roggy's fine. I'm going to put Roggy on upper C tier. You fight this one, and its gear looks like a cowboy set, which is kind of cool. If you want to look like a cowboy, go kill yourself some great Roggies. And then the third of the third generation Raptors is Great Baggy. This one you fight in cold or frozen environments, and it spits sleep venom. Great Baggy is fine. I'm going to put you lower than Roggy. Actually, I'm going to put you a little bit, yeah, well, right there. This monster is really fast normally, and on Master Rank or G Rank, they usually give it even more speed, so that's going to be fun. A super spastic, fast, small target that can put you to sleep. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, here's the original Lao Shanlong. Kind of blends in with the background. We'll move on to another early generation monster, one that has not come back recently, but was in Generations and Generations Ultimate. Where is your subspecies? There it is. Gypceros. Gypceros is a big, goofy, kind of ostrich-looking monster. It's a flying type, nope, bird type wyvern, I believe. It's got this hammer crest on its head that it can smack against its beak, and it creates a flashbang, which is kind of dangerous because it can do it quickly. If you're not careful, you'll find yourself getting stunned when it does a flashbang. And it can also spit poison. It's a poison element monster. And like Pink has mentioned in the chat, the most noteworthy and notorious thing that Gypceros can do is when its health gets low, it will play dead. It will go into the I'm dying animation that normally ends a quest, and it will fall to the ground and just lie there motionless. And you can go up, you can hit it, you can carve bits off of it, but after a few seconds, it'll wake up. And in the games, if you haven't broken its crest, when it's lying on the ground, it'll start to flash, which is how you know it's not actually dead. You also won't get a quest clear message, which is the other hint that it's not actually over. But when it wakes up, it'll thrash around and jump back to its feet, and it does a ton of damage. And so most people's experience fighting Gypceros for the first time is getting trolled by it playing dead, which is really funny. And normally this monster would rank low, but the fact that it's so goofy and it can fool you and potentially cart you with that level of damage, I'm going to put it up on high C tier. Gypceros is kind of a goofy troll, and I like that. It can also run up walls, which is kind of fun. They could bring this monster back and give it some more interesting tricks. But yeah, everyone falls for it the first time. And I see Iconic Redeem Day Hydrate. I will drink more of my Gafuel, thank you. Now, the subspecies for Gypceros. Purple Gypceros is just stronger, faster, different color. I like its coloring a lot, but it is quite literally the same fight. So you're going down here on D tier. They just gave it some different moves or even switched its element. It's still poison. Just pretty much filler. Not terribly interesting monster. Alright. Moving on. This is second generation debut. But not this one. And I gotta group these together from a whole bunch of different places. This is Tigrex. One of my favorite monsters. Where is your base version? Is it in the Rise list? Is it in the World list? Where? Okay, here it is. Base Tigrex. Where's Brute? Brute subspecies right here. There's a Deviant. We'll do the Deviants later. So we've got Tigrex here. It's a flying type wyvern. It has this bright orange and blue, like tiger stripe, hence the name pattern. And Tigrex is very aggressive. This thing, unlike some of the other wyverns, which will breathe fire at you or poison you or fly around, Tigrex, despite having wings, is mostly on the ground for the fight, and it tries to run you over. It's very fast and pouncy, and it'll just charge. If you're fighting from range, good luck, because this thing covers the ground very quickly. Very aggressive. Its roar can actually do damage, sort of like an area of effect around it. And overall, really dynamic fight. I like Tigrex a lot. I first fought it in Portable Freedom Unite. I think it's the poster child for Freedom. Someone who's played the older games would probably know because it's on the box. But Tigrex is going up here on A tier. What a fun fight. I like its coloring, its design. Its fight keeps you on your toes, and it's definitely a tough customer. Its subspecies, Brute Tigrex, doesn't have a different element, but it's got a pretty distinct moveset. It can use its roar kind of like a projectile instead of just an area of effect, and is much more aggressive. I don't like its design as much color-wise, so Brute's going to go on B tier. I'll put you down here. As a more recent subspecies, it switches the formula around more, and I do like it. If its coloring was a little more distinct, it'd probably rate higher. And then the third, this is another rare species, so same category as Lucent and Abyssal. This is Molten Tigrex, which came from 3U or 4U, I don't remember which. But this is a rare species endgame target. Like the others, you fight it in its own arena, and it is basically regular Tigrex on steroids. It's much bigger, and has this molten red color scheme, and when you fight it, it's pretty slow. It hits hard and kind of doesn't have to do much to cart you, but it's not quick. And as the fight progresses, Molten Tigrex gets madder and madder and madder and more angry, and it starts to speed up like a train, which is usually what people call this thing, the pain train. And as the fight progresses, it enters these different levels of rage, and its speed and damage just keep going up like a curve. Its claws can create the blast element when it scrapes the ground, and by the end, this thing is just on a rampage. It's such a good example of a ramping up fight. Really cool monster. As a result, Molten Tigrex is going up here on S tier. Super neat monster that I'm willing to bet money we're going to see in DLC for Sunbreak. If they're bringing back rare species like Lucent, pretty sure we're going to get this one. And good luck, because that was a really intense, difficult fight. But the idea that this thing just keeps on chugging and keeps on getting more difficult as the fight progresses is pretty fun. So So we shall see if we see that one in the current generation. Next up, we've got another flying type. This is Monoblos, and here's its subspecies, White Monoblos. We will see Diablos further down. Where are you? Is it in the world tier? Let's see. It's either going to be in the world tier or the rise tier, I guess. Where is Diablos? Here's Apex Diablos. Oh, here we go. Okay. So Monoblos is similar to Diablos. This one came first, I believe. It looks like a big wyvern chasmosaur dinosaur. It's got like a frill with these horns and one single horn like a rhino on its nose. And you fight Monoblos in desert environments, and it has a pretty basic move set. They retooled it for, I believe, Generations and Generations Ultimate, but it basically just charges and burrows through the ground at you. It's not super distinct from Diablos, which would be in more games later, but I do like Monoblos. If they bring this one back and just give it a more varied moveset and kind of flip the script on it, I think it'd be a pretty good monster. So Monoblos is going on B tier. We'll put you down here. Its subspecies, White Monoblos, is pretty much the same fight, but more difficult with higher speed and damage. But I actually really like the kind of albino color scheme of White Monoblos. So we're just going to put them on the same tier, but one notch higher. If they were to bring back subspecies and the base species, they'd have to give these two some tricks to make them different, because they're very similar in the older games. But we'll see. And like we mentioned before, Monoblos' skull is what Hermitaur uses for its home, like hermit crab, which is kind of cool. All right. Next up, we've got another unique wyvern classification that we have not seen since 4th generation, which is the snake wyverns. These are the only two, I think, in this family that have been in a game so far. And I think it has to do with the fact that the skeleton is different and kind of hard to animate. That's my guess. This is Najarala. And Najarala is a long-bodied snake wyvern. It's got 4 limbs, but they're sort of far apart on its body. Even longer and more serpentine than like a leviathan. And Najarala's gimmick is that it has these long scales all over its body that it can either use as projectiles or can rattle them to create really loud kind of sonic noises. And it's a neat fight, kind of chaotic with the way they animated it, and the camera kind of wigs out when you're fighting this thing. It'll try and coil around you and constrict you kind of like a boa constrictor. But super distinct and neat design. I really like Najarala. I'm going to put you up here on high B tier. I'd like to see these brought back and maybe tweaked and refined slightly, but they're pretty unique in 4U, which is the 4th generation game I played. Really cool monster. Tidal Najarala, the subspecies, is water element, and it uses its scales as hazard projectiles on the field. What it would do is it would fling its scales and embed them in the ground, and then spit a blast of water that bounces between them, which is pretty unique. As a result, you had to sort of watch the field and make sure it wasn't setting itself up. So I'm going to put you on lower B tier. Its color scheme is really neat too. A mix of bright yellows and blues and purples. I'm going to put you over here. Again, I want to see the snakes brought back. I think they could do a lot with that. especially with the whole riding mechanics. We'll see. Alright, now we're getting into spiders. Spider family of creatures in Monster Hunter, which are classified differently than the insects and the crabs. My voice is getting tired. I've been talking about Monster Hunter for 2 hours now. We'll keep trucking. We've got Nerscylla and its subspecies down here. So the spider type creatures are weird. In the Monster Hunter universe, they have 6 legs, not 8 like arachnids, but they're categorized differently in the family called Temnocerans. And like we talked about before, I could give a whole biology lesson on classifications of creatures in this game. The flying winged insect types are Neopterons. The crabs and shelled kind of mollusk type shellfish creatures are called Carpassions, and then spiders are called Temnocerans. And Nerscylla was the first one we saw in 4th generation. It is a big kind of bladed armed spider, very nimble and very quick. And Nerscylla could cocoon you in webs. It could poison you, which was its main element from its jaws. It had these long extending, I think they're called chelicerae. That's the name of whatever that body part is in actual spiders. But it could extend out these jaws and poison you, put you to sleep with its stinger, and it was, in general, fast. Really neat monster and had this kind of erratic way of moving. His animation was super cool. I really like Nerscylla a lot. Wazzy says, okay, gotta bounce. Alright, Wazzy, thanks for tuning in and listening to me talk about something you don't know anything about. I appreciate your perspective as someone who doesn't know anything about Monster Hunter. That by itself means you should definitely fill out the tier list just to see where you'd put things. But I will catch you later. Have yourself a good evening. So going back to Nerscylla, a spider monster in 4th generation was very unique. I'm putting you up on A tier, above Seltas Queen. I really hope we see this monster brought back in the future. Also, Nerscylla wears the skin of other monsters as camouflage, and Nerscylla wears Gypceros down here as its skin, hence its poison element. Subspecies Shrouded Nerscylla functions a little bit differently. It focuses on paralysis elements instead of poison, and has kind of more of these swinging type moves. And this one wears Khezu, the big penis monster, as its skin for paralysis, even though Khezu is electricity. But Shrouded is cool. It's a slightly different fight, not dramatically different. But I'm going to put you down here on low B tier. It's not a carbon copy, and its design is really cool. Again, bringing back the spiders, I think would be really good. They've already added spiders to the current generation, which we'll get to for Rise. But you never know. Maybe in DLC. The gear, which doesn't factor in the rating here for Nerscylla, was really cool too. You look like a big mech. Next up, we've got more amphibians, which we haven't seen since Tetsukabra, I believe. This is Zamtrios. Zamtrios is an amphibious frog shark creature you fight in ice environments. It sort of burrows under the ground and spits ice, and when you make it mad, it encases its whole body in ice armor. It gives it this whole spiky look. Really neat monster. One of my favorites to be introduced in 4th generation, I believe. I want to say 4 and 4U is when Zamtrios was introduced. And another thing that it does as you fight it, eventually when you make it really mad, it will inflate its whole body up like a balloon and go from being like an icy armored mode to I'm gonna roll over you and crush you mode which is pretty fun. Neat monster. I don't know if we'll see it in the current generation. But Zamtrios, you're going to go up here on upper B tier. I will put you ahead of Barioth. Pretty unique monster. Hopefully we'll see it in the future. Its subspecies, this is Tiger Stripe Zamtrios. Pretty much the same thing except desert version. And instead of ice, it uses regular water element. Not too different. I do like its color scheme and design quite a bit. So I'm going to put you... I'm going to put you over here above Baleful Giganox. If the fight was a little more different, I'd probably rank it higher. But still a worthwhile monster. Tiger Stripe's cool. Ooh, next up we have a monster that has not been in the series since way, way back in the day. This is Shen Gaoren. And Shen Gaoren is a crab type Carpathian, but I think it's technically an Elder Dragon. Let me look that up. This one is big. Okay, not an Elder Dragon, just a really, really big crab. And the way you fight this one is kind of like Lao Shan in the older games. It's this big lumbering crab. It's several stories tall, massive. It's got these huge long legs. And it uses a Lao Shan lung shell as its home, like a hermit crab. And you fight this one by following along siege-like and beating on its legs and trying to knock it over. This one could stand to be brought back and updated, but it is a cool concept. So I'm going to put Shen on B tier. The idea that you have this massive building size crab, a giant enemy crab, as it were, has a lot of potential, but it's just kind of an old, outdated fight. So if they bring this one back, I think they could make it a lot more dynamic and modernized, and then be a pretty cool fight. And you can hit its weak point for massive damage. Alright. Moving on. Now we're going to get some Elder Dragons here. This is the final boss of Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, which was only released in Japan. I played it using some mods on my PSP. This is Amatsu, the Storm Dragon. And Amatsu is this Leviathan body type, but it's billowy wind water storm dragon. And when you fight it, it flies in the air, it sort of hovers, and it's got this really flowing, billowy look to it. And this is one of the coolest Elder Dragons, in my opinion. I like Amatsu a lot. So we're going to put this one up on S tier. It's going to outpace our current S tier entries. When you fight this thing, it's in its own arena, like a sky peak that's in the middle of a big storm. And it attacks by trying to run you over. It can spit water in either blasts or these concentrated orbital cannon beams. And as you fight Amatsu, it starts to affect the area around it, and the storm intensifies, and its theme, which is really cool, starts to change. So it has like an initial phase, a rage phase, and an additional rage phase, and as it goes, it becomes more and more dangerous. Super neat monster, and fantastic design. One of the best Elder Dragons, in my opinion. So yeah, Amatsu's going up here on S tier. I'd love to see this one brought back. And it's very kind of Eastern dragon design too, so it would fit with the Rise aesthetic. For Sunbreak, I don't know, maybe not as much. But everyone sort of theorized if they were going to do DLC for base Rise when it came out, Amatsu would have been a perfect entry. But we'll have to wait and see. Alright. Now we are moving into... This is still 4th gen. This is Monster Hunter Generations. And this is Astalos. Astalos is part of the 4 flagships called the Fated Four in Monster Hunter Generations. It's a flying type Thunder Wyvern, and kind of unique design. It's like a dragonfly. It has these insect-like wings and tail, and Astalos' whole deal is that it charges up electricity in different parts of its body, and as it charges up, it becomes more dangerous. And this monster is really fun to fight. Looked really cool with this kind of bright green, and the parts of its body that would become charged would glow a lighter green color. They brought it back in Sunbreak, and they gave it a redesign, and they gave it more of an iridescence on its wings, kind of like a dragonfly wing is what I would liken it to, and it looks really cool. I fought this thing in the demo one time just to try it out, and the fight is very intense. It's a very aggressive monster. Astalos is awesome. I'm going to put it on S tier. Probably going to be lower. I think I'm going to have to think about the Fated Four and where they fall, because I go back and forth about which one's my favorite. But Astalos is such a cool monster, and I can't wait to farm its gear in Sunbreak. It's going to be a good one. Taking a break to go back in time to, I think, 2nd generation. This is the original species for Copper Blangonga, which was the first thing I ranked. This is the regular version. You encounter it in snowy or tundra environments. It can spit snowballs at you, summon minions, and every time it burrows under the ground, it takes your tracking off. In the old Monster Hunter games, you'd have to paintball monsters in order to see them on the map. And Blangonga would get rid of tracking every time it burrowed, so you have to repaint it or you lose it on the map. Pretty fun fight. Where did I put the original? Down here on C. Regular Blangonga, I'm going to go up here on upper C tier. It's basically like a burrowing ice Rajang that's less dangerous, but not bad. More interesting than the desert version. I think the desert version also could shrug off paintballs if it burrows under the sand. But now we're going to move on to probably one of my least favorite monsters in the series. Something that's going to rank even lower than Cephadrome. This is Bulldrome. Bulldrome is this big boar-like creature. It's decently sized, has these big tusks. Where Cephadrome would burrow around, kind of be a nuisance and spit stuff at you, Bulldrome is one of the biggest troll creatures in the entire series. This thing and its lesser forms, the Bullfangos, which are... where are you? Here? Have existed in Monster Hunter since the beginning. And Bulldrome is like the alpha version of the regular Bullfangos. And its whole gimmick is that it runs you over. It's pretty quick on its feet, just charges and knocks you over. It is incredibly obnoxious. And I don't like fighting this monster or anything that is nearby. You almost have to kill it on the map, because if it shows up where you're fighting your actual target, you can expect it to knock you over and interrupt your fight. And for some of the deviants, which we see down here, the deviants were fought on this ticket system of increasing difficulty in order to get their gear. And most of the late tier deviant fights stuck you in an arena with a Bulldrome, because they knew how much it sucks to fight these at the same time. So this may be the worst ranked monster in the entire tier list. Bulldrome can go off and become bacon. Really obnoxious. And with that, we are in the deviant tier of monsters. So how do I want to separate these out? Let's do all the deviants in a row. I think that's the easiest way to do it. We're going to jump ahead to some monsters I haven't talked about, but it's probably best to just do these in a row and knock them out. This is unique to Generations and Generations Ultimate. So we'll probably run through these quickly, because, again, I haven't talked about the regular versions of some of these monsters. So Let me put them all in a row here. You go here, you go here, you go there, and you should be the last one. Yeah, I think that'll do it. So the Deviants are their own classification of unique monsters in Generations and Generations Ultimate. They're canonically monsters that have survived encounters with hunters and have evolved to be stronger as a result. And so that means they either have unique moves or different attributes to their design that separates them from their regular versions. So the first one on here is Crystal Beard Uragaan. And unlike the regular Uragaan or its Stinky Steel subspecies, Crystal Beard has all these gems embedded in its chin. And I honestly don't remember how different its moveset is because I didn't fight this one a lot. But I think it's one of the more forgettable of the Deviants, as illustrated by the fact that I don't even remember what it does other than it looks different. I think it's got slightly different moves when it's dropping hazards on the field. But Crystal Beard is pretty forgettable. So you're going to go here below Fart Boy. Its armor set, I remember, was good only for its luck boost, I think. I never fought this thing. I fought it maybe once. The rest of the Deviants on here, I do have an opinion on. So we'll move through the list. This is Deadeye Garuga, which is a deviant version of the regular one, which we haven't talked about yet because it's down here. This is, just for context, Garuga is a more advanced cousin of Cuckoo up here on B tier. Basically, it's older, edgier, angrier, more dangerous cousin. And the Deadeye version, it's got a scarred eye, which we'll see in a couple different incarnations, but it's very dangerous poison and high mobility deviant. Deadeye Garuga is a pretty challenging fight. It would be flying and zipping all over the place, and I think it inflicts a higher tier of poison. It also had a pretty striking, bright color scheme, while the regular ones kind of got this dark purple. So I'm going to put Deadeye on B tier. Or I'm going to put high C tier. Not bad. I think the original version from older games and the remix version from Iceborne for Garuga is more interesting. Next up in the Deviant list, we have a Deviant version of Monster Hunter's mascot, the poster boy. This is Dread King Rathalos. And Dread King took a lot of the ideas of the King of the Skies, which is Rathalos' title, and cranks it up to 11 in deviant form. Very dangerous, and you can expect to be hit with fireballs from everywhere. Iconic says, got to go now. Thanks for the chill stream. Best of luck with the ranking. Alright, Iconic. Thanks for tuning in. I understand you don't play Monster Hunter, so I appreciate you just hanging out and listening to me talk about monsters and where I put them on a tier list. So I hope you have a good rest of your evening, and I will catch you later. So Dread King, by design, is pretty neat. It's got bigger wings with these really bright sort of markings on the membranes. Fight was kind of annoying, actually, even though its gear was pretty decent, which doesn't factor in the rating here. I'm going to put Dread King in low B. I would rank other species of Rathalos probably higher, but the Deviant, it's fine. Its counterpart, female counterpart, Dread Queen Rathian, takes the Rathian moveset and heavily focuses around poison. A good comparison would be Apex Rathian over here in Rise. Pretty much the same moveset of Dread Queen. She could flip her tail around and deposit poison spines as hazards on the ground. Not bad. I think her design is much better than Apex Rathian. The Apexes are all going to probably be on C tier for me, because by design they're pretty simple and they're just the deviant movesets from GU for the most part. So I'm going to put Dread Queen on B tier below her boyfriend. Next up, we have a deviant for Tetsukabra, the Sumo Frog. This is Drill Tusk. Drill Tusk, I don't think it has a different element, but its whole deal is that it was much more aggressive, and it could do this one move where it super jumps and goes into orbit and then slams down from above. Overall, more dangerous, like a more aggressive, dangerous moveset. I'm going to put you on C tier. Probably over in the middle. Hey, Naked Snake's here. Naked Snake says, to quote the Monster Hunter movie, "Monster kills monster." We don't talk about the movie here, Naked Snake. Why you gotta hurt me like that? All right, next deviant. This is Grimclaw Tigrex. Grimclaw Tigrex, again, doesn't have a different element, but it has these really strong forearms that it uses to create explosions through the ground. So it creates like these exploding shock waves whenever it slams the ground, and is a pretty dangerous encounter. This one I think is more interesting than Brute. So I'm going to put you up here on B tier. I remember fighting this thing in its different tiers of difficulty. Pretty fun fight. Snake says, I'm not doing anything right now. I'm just messing around with a PS Vita emulator. There's some good stuff on Vita. If you can get a chance to play the Tokiden series, which is like medieval Japan Monster Hunter with Oni and yokai, that's a good game. Alright. Next deviant, this is Soul Seer Mizutsune. Mizutsune, one of the Fated Four, which we've not talked about because technically it's down here in the Rise tier list. Its deviant form is interesting. The regular one is this Leviathan type, kind of fox reptile creature. I like Mizutsune a lot. And it attacks using water bubbles, and it can do things like shoot you with water lasers and knock you off balance with its bubble blight. Soul Seer is a Mizutsune that lost its sight through encounters with hunters or something. Its eyes, which you can sort of see in the icon here, its eyes have been cut out, so it's completely blind. And as a result, it has to use its other senses to find targets. And Soul Seer's bubbles were like foxfire bubbles. Instead of just being water, they would ignite into fire and be much more dangerous. Snake says, I got the emulator working perfectly fine. The problem is I have to find the game files. It's the hard part. Ah, yes. I can't help you there. I generally try and avoid trolling through the shadier parts of the internet to find ROMs. But I definitely have dabbled in the past. So for Soul Seer, it's blind. When you make it mad, it gets this sort of foxfire light that shines from its eyes, which is a really neat effect. And it's a pretty tough monster. The regular version is challenging. The Deviant is definitely more so. But it's so neat design-wise. I'm going to put Soul Seer up here on B tier. The moveset for this monster was repurposed into Apex Mizutsune. It's pretty much that fight. So I don't know if we'd see Soul Seer come back. If they brought it back, they would have to give it some new tricks. Naked Snake says, my rule of thumb is if the console has stopped being supported and there's not a new version of the game on a newer console, then it's fine to emulate. I'm not going to debate the ethics of emulation, man. It's fine. I think if there's no mechanism to play old systems, then you have no choice but to find an emulator. I just don't like digging through places to find all the resources. But I'm not going to sit here and say you shouldn't emulate a game unless you own it. Now that's everybody's choice. It's fine. Okay. More deviants. Next one is Glavenus. The deviant for Glavenus, who we also haven't talked about, because Glavenus is going to be down here on the Iceborne tier. Snake says, so we're sorting the monsters from Monster Hunter? Yes, this is a tier list of pretty much every monster in the series from Generation 1 through 5, excluding the new ones in Sunbreak, and is a tier list from S to F. This is small monsters which are not part of the tier list and things I haven't hunted yet, but this is my ranking for where I place them, and the rules, which I can turn on here, are the rankings are based on creature design, the hunting experience, and does not factor in the gear you make out of them. So how fun the hunts are, how cool they look, and those are the rules we're using to rank them on the tier list here. And it's a lot. I am going to try and push through further, but my voice might actually give out on me the 3-hour mark. If I can get through Rise, that would be good. But I don't know. We'll see. Snake says, only real monster I know for Monster Hunter would have to be the Jet Dragon. Yes, that is Valstrax. Valstrax is right here. And it's... Is it variant? Oh, yep. It's variants here too. Really cool monster. We will get to Valstrax. But Glavenus' deviant, Hellblade Glavenus, is pretty neat. The regular one, which we'll talk about here, is this dinosaur with the big bladed tail. The deviant adds more blast and danger to the fight. This one was meta gear too in Generations Ultimate, so we definitely farmed this one a lot. Hellblade I'm going to put up on A tier. It's a cool deviant. Bigger, angrier, more dangerous. Pink says, why not just speedrun it without being overly informative to give your throat a rest? I could, but the reality is I picked this tier list because I had a lot to say about it. So it's more about me saying the information and analysis that I wanted, as opposed to just covering a ton of stuff. So I could just go like, this deviant, B tier, this one, but I kind of want to explain why. To me, explaining why is more important than just getting through it all. I do not expect you folks to sit here and listen to me the entire time either, because again, I'm talking about Monster Hunter for like 3 hours. But Snake is kind of right in that I also feel like you planned the entire stream around this, so if I just sped through it, I wouldn't have anything else to do. Well, there was no doubt that this was going to take a long time. And one potential thing we could do is get through a certain point, and then in the future, once I've had a chance to play through Sunbreak and we add a bunch of new monsters that are in the game, then I have more to rank. So we could do part 2 after I've played through the base Sunbreak game, and we do like a final of the stuff that was introduced in that game, because there's I think about half a dozen-ish new monsters to the series that are in Sunbreak. Let me think. There's the 3 lords, the final boss, a couple variants. Yeah, there'd be some stuff to add. So what we could do everything up to right before Rise, and then I do an updated version of this later, because this person's probably going to add the Sunbreak stuff after the game comes out. And there's some stuff here that's from the older games. We could do that, unless I want to do a 4-hour stream. But let's see. We got to get through the the deviants. But we'll see. Next up, we've got Astalos of the Fated Four. Astalos' deviant Bolt Reaver. Bolt Reaver Astalos is probably one of the most difficult fights in Generations Ultimate. You take the Electric Dragonfly, which is known for being aggressive and being very dangerous, and you give it even more dangerous attacks, like a lightsaber on its head. You give it the ability to create a black hole, which can pull you in from across the map. Bolt Reaver was a tough fight, but it's a cool monster. So I'm putting you up here on high B tier. I'll put you above Soul Seer. This thing was such a pain to fight and farm, but it's so over the top in design. It's essentially a frontier monster with its crazy mechanics. But they kind of went it all in for Generations Ultimate and Generations. So it's not too surprising. Next up, we have a Bird Wyvern, which debuted in Generations, I think. It's either Generations or 4. I think it's Generations. This is Malfestio. And we could talk about the original version first. Malfestio is an owl wyvern. It's got this sort of kind of harlequin type of thing on its head and this bright colored feathers. And you fight it early in the game, and its big mechanic is that it could inflict different confusing status ailments. One of them reversed your controls, which is pretty interesting. And it was kind of a monster that would mess with you. And I'd rank original Malfestio mid B tier. It's a cool monster. I'd like to see this one brought back. Its deviant Nightcloak Malfestio could teleport and become invisible. And it would kind of blink out of existence and then zip around. Kind of like Chameleos and Lucent Nargacuga. Very dangerous, but not bad. More annoying to fight because you had to deal with that on top of the ailments. So I'm putting Nightcloak down here. That could be a frustrating fight. Let's group a couple other common ones together that I haven't talked about yet. Let's talk about another crab. This is Shogun Ceanataur, cousin to the Daimyo Hermitar, the red hermit crab up top. And where is its subspecies? People always forget to put that one on the list. Oh well, it's not here. Shogun was a hermit crab type, but instead of kind of the big, heavy-hitting, bulky moveset of Hermitar, Ceanataur had these long, kind of sickle-like claws that would retract and flip out, almost like a praying mantis. And it could inflict bleed in the later games and function a little bit differently. It's much faster and quick in its attacks. Red Dragon says, still at it? Yep, we're still at it. We're almost through GU. The monsters from Generations Ultimate and the Deviants. I have not decided if I'm going to go through Rise. I was saying, probably before you jump back on, that I may do this tier list again after the Sunbreak monsters have been added to it, and then we do like a final wrap up then, because this is what we still have to go through. That's probably at least another hour and a half, and my voice is starting to go. But we can get through the Deviants and Generations Ultimate. So Shogun Ceanataur is kind of a different crab species, and this one's coming back in Sunbreak, so that'll be fun. The base version, I'm going to put it here on B tier. I think I kind of go back and forth on whether or not I like this one or Daimyo better, so we'll kind of put them tied in the same tier. Its deviant Rustraiser Ceanataur was a lot more dangerous. This one might have been where they introduced bleed as an ailment. It could sharpen its claws and had a much more aggressive moveset. This thing had good gear too, which doesn't factor in, but Rustraisers, I'm going to put it a little lower. Still a cool monster, but not quite as iconic. More of a pain. More of a pain as far as the fight goes, but still neat design. They kind of merged its moveset into the Sanitar moveset that we're getting in Sunbreak. Moving on, next deviant. This is a Nargacuga deviant. This is Silverwind Nargacuga. It has a similar color scheme to the regular one, which I guess we won't get to in today's stream. Regular boy down here. Silverwind had these white silvery stripes on its body, hence its name. And its main deal is that it could use its tail to create wind projectiles. And as a result, you're dealing with this thing shooting stuff at you in addition to just trying to run you over and smack you a bunch. Silverwind was cool. I like the kind of switch up in design. Gave me some shades of Lucent in the fight with more projectiles. So we'll put Silverwind down here towards the bottom of B tier. Next deviant on the list, we've got Stonefist. Stonefist Hermitard. To think for a sec. This is a deviant for the red crab. And Stonefist's deal was it had one giant single claw, kind of like a fiddler crab, and a regular size one. And it would use it kind of like a hammer, like an impact device. You could also use it to do kind of like a singular heavy hit, and would still spit water and bubble projectiles. Stonefist was cool. I'm going to rate this one a little bit lower. I think it was more neat in design than Rust Razor. And it had this darker striped blue and red color scheme instead of the white and red. This one also, I think, has some moves that were repurposed into Hermitar for Sunbreak, from what I've seen in screenshots. Alright. Next deviant, this is Red Helm Arzuros. Arzuros, the early game target introduced in Portable 3rd, is down here in the Rise tier, because it's an early game target in Rise as well. Red Helms is the deviant species that basically was meant to fly in the face of everyone who thought Arzuros was a pushover, because this thing was not a pushover. You fight Red Helm and it's much bigger. It's kind of similar in size to Gosharag in Rise, and had stronger, more developed forearms and this mohawk of bright red hair on its head and body, hence the name. And Red Helm attacked by doing a lot of flying butt slams. Apex Arzuros, which is here. Here's regular. Here's Apex. They gave a lot of the moves from Red Helm to Apex Arzuros and Rise, but basically everything Red Helm did was just more dangerous and had bigger range of motion. It could do this big sort of uppercut that would launch fish at you if you're near water. And I hunted this one a ton because it had a really good hammer set of armor. But good lord, the rare drop was breaking its hair, and breaking its hair gave you like a 10% chance to get the drop. And you needed a ton of it to max out the armor. So fight-wise, difficult. Design, pretty good. Red Helm, I'm going to put you up on B tier. A little bit of PTSD from having to farm that up. But other than that, definitely a good remix of a monster that's pretty much a cakewalk. Next up, in a similar vein, we've got Thunderlord Zinogre. This is the deviant species for everyone's favorite Thunder Doggo, who we've not talked about because it's down here. And down here? No, this is Apex Zinogre. Regular version is not here. It's only here. Okay. Thunderlord is Super Saiyan Zinogre. It starts in a powered up state and has a bunch of really, really dangerous moves. Like they did for some of the other ones that came out of GU, they gave its moves to Apex Thunderlord was quite challenging. I've mentioned this before, but farming this thing's gear was so difficult because at upper tiers of difficulty, it would one-shot you with everything. So Thunderlord, design and fight-wise, is good. I'm going to put you under Silverwind. I do not have fond memories of getting carded constantly by the high difficulty of that fight. Regular Zinogre, for spoiler purposes, would be up on S tier in the number 2 slot. It's my second favorite monster. Next up in the Deviants, this is the Deviant for Gammoth. We can talk about Gammoth here. This is the 4th of the Fated 4. You have Glavenus, Astalos, Mizitsune, and Gammoth, the 4 flagships from Generations. Gammoth is this big armored woolly mammoth you fight in the ice environments. It's a really cool monster and got a unique skeleton. We've not seen Gammoth in any games since Generations and Generations Ultimate. Hopefully they bring it back in Sunbreak. If they bring back Glavenus and Gammoth, they have all Fated 4 flagships in one game. That'd be pretty sweet. But I like the uniqueness and style of Gammoth. So I'm going to put you up on A tier. Again, interesting design. You have woolly mammoth elephant attributes. It's got armor. Its feet and legs, I think, were inspired by a tortoise. Neat monster. And it's gigantic, too. The size of a house. It's Deviant, Elderfrost Gammoth. Took that whole idea of a big kind of lumbering colossus and gave it a whole bunch of more dangerous attacks. I do like that it had a mix of kind of red, which you don't see on the icon here, but it had kind of a mix of red streaks, and its palette was a little bit different. Elderfrost is good. I'm going to put it up on B tier. I don't think it's quite as iconic as the standard version, and its fight was pretty decently difficult. So I'll put you down here in lower B tier. Next up, we've got Deviant form of Lagombi, the Snow Koala Bunny. We have not talked about Lagombi because it is... Where is it? Put it in Rise's list, or is it in World? It wasn't in World, I don't think. Let's see, where are you? Ah, there you are. Okay, well, we'll leave it there for now. Look, the Snow Baron Lagombi is the Deviant. It was basically a bigger, angrier version of Lagombi, and if you remember how regular version can pick up and throw snowballs at you, or chunks of ice, Snow Baron would pick up a giant spirit bomb-sized massive snowball and throw that at you. It was a pretty dangerous creature. I remember farming it. Its fight was difficult. Probably one of the lower rated Deviants. I'm going to put you in C tier. Down here. The design and palette for Snow Baron is kind of cool. I do like the way it looks, but its fight's not super dynamic. We'll keep that one down here. And the last of the Deviants, let's do this. I'm going to arrange everything this way. We're going to have a segue. I'm going to do everything from Generations, and then we're going to stop with Valstrax. But the last Deviant on the list is actually one I have not fought, but I've watched a lot of footage. This is Bloodbath Diablos. Bloodbath Diablos is a really cool Deviant. It's the flagship of GU, in fact. You had the Fated 4, and then the flagship for GU was this Deviant for Diablos. It had one overgrown, asymmetrical-looking horn, and these sort of veins of crimson all over its body. And its whole deal was that it was super aggressive in a fight, and when you made it mad, it could create these big explosive, like steam clouds of energy off its body. Very dangerous. and very aggressive fight. But this is not one that I've done. I was in the process of unlocking that fight in GU when I was still playing it, but really cool monster. If I would rank it after hunting it, probably A tier, but I can't put it there since I've never actually completed a hunt against Bloodbath. Moving on, let's do this. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the flagship for Generations was Valstrax, I believe. Let me look that up. I don't want to misquote. Valstrax is not a flagship. Okay. It's in the opening cinematic for Generations Ultimate, but it is not a flagship. Okay. Valstrax, as an Elder Dragon, is the one that Snake was talking about earlier, the Jet Dragon. It is a big, kind of avian-looking, bird-like dragon that has these jets on its wings. These jet appendages can be rearranged to point in different directions, and they use dragon energy as propulsion. So quite literally, this thing is like a fighter jet in dragon form. And you fight it, and it uses its arms like weapons. It can smack you with them by flipping them around. It can align them more like blades and stab or sweep with them. Or it could just straight up shoot dragon energy projectiles at you. And when you make it mad, it'll start taking off into the air and go off the map, essentially. And then once it does that, you'll see its icon start zooming around the map, and you can see it flying through the sky like a red comet. And what Valstrax will do is it will circle and then pick somebody and then dive bomb at super high speed and hit the ground in a big dragon explosion. And you basically have to Superman dive away from it, and it's crazy. And there's this sonic boom type effect, like a flashbang that goes off and hits the ground. Pink says it was great when we got destroyed by Valstrax. We lasted 3 minutes, I think. Yeah, the event one absolutely murdered us. And that was the variant, Crimson Glow. The original version has some attacks that weren't in Rise, but Valstrax is a really neat monster, one of my favorites. So I'm putting you up on S tier. I think I'm gonna rate Valstrax higher than Gore. The idea that you have this absurd concept of a jet-powered Elder Dragon is straight out of Frontier, but it's so cool. Next up, we've got the final boss of Generations, of the end game. You have Nakarkos. Nakarkos, which I've talked about a couple times before, is an Elder Dragon, but you fight it in this arena type area, the Wyvern's End, I think it's called. It's a big skeletal graveyard of monster bits. And Nakarkos is a big mollusk-like cuttlefish or squid creature that uses monster skulls as its home, kind of like a hermit crab. And it has two big appendages here that it covers in the bones of dead monsters. And it puts the skulls on the end. They look like these big skeletal Hydra heads. And you fight it. Occasionally it will break off the bits of the skulls and pick up new ones from other monsters. And it takes on their attributes. So it might pull up a Lagiacrus skull, and now it's got Thunder Element. Or it pulls up a Glavenus skull, now it's got Fire. Or Brachydios, who we haven't talked about yet, and then now it's got Blast. Super neat monster, very unique design. I really like Nakarkos a lot. So we're going to put you up on S tier. This one's high on my list of ones to bring back. If they find a way to bring this creature back and repurpose it in Sunbreak, I'd be very happy. It's very unique. And the last one we'll talk about today before we get ready to jump off and do it to be continued, we've got the end boss of Generations Ultimate. This is Atal Ka. Atal Ka is also an Elder Dragon, despite being a Neopteron bug type creature, and it's a big Egyptian golden praying mantis looking creature. And you also fight Atal Ka in a unique environment, the castle ruins or something like that. And you fight this creature, and you fight it one-on-one, and it moves around the map. It'll hit you with debuffs for defense, and it uses this golden silk that it spins like a spider, and it can cocoon you, or it can use the string to pull objects out of the ground, and it uses garbage and debris that it finds as weapons. Like its usual go-to at the start of the fight is to pull up a girder and use that girder like a big bludgeoning instrument that it swings around using its golden silk. And after you fight it for a bit, it gets upset, drops the weapon it was using, goes into the middle of the arena, and pulls up something else. And this has pretty much been spoiled, so I'll just explain it here. What this thing does, after you make it mad enough, is it pulls up a giant pile of junk that's shaped like a dragon, and it basically pulls a mech out of the ground. And it takes the mech and jumps inside and uses its silk to control it like a puppet. So you go from fighting a golden praying mantis creature to a giant mech dragon crafted out of debris and garbage, and now you're basically playing Shadow of the Colossus. You have to climb on it and break bits. It's a very, very unique, epic scale fight, and super unique for Monster Hunter. I think Atal Ka is one of the coolest Elder Dragons they've ever introduced. It's such like a spectacle to see. This one might actually beat out Amatsu because of just the ridiculous concept. Again, mech piloting golden mantis. That's pretty unique. And it looks cool. Its theme is awesome. It's such a cool fight. As far as overall Elder Dragons, this wouldn't be at the top of my list, but pretty high on everything we've seen so far. Of all of the older game Elder Dragons I want them to bring back, the Carcos is up there pretty high. But if they bring back Atal Ka, then I will. That's my number one for Elder Dragons. Again, it's a mantis. It's an Elder Dragon. I don't know why, but if they give that one the treatment like they did for Alatreon in Iceborne, I will be very happy. But they'd have to do a lot, so I don't know. It's possible. We'll see. All right. With that, we will pause there. There are these 4, which are from the older generation, but there's also some older monsters that are kind of shoved in down here. And then we have Rise and World Iceborne in between. But at the risk of losing my voice, we will do those in a future session, ideally after we get the new Sunbreak monsters added here too. Pink asks, oh hey, have you ranked Kyurem yet? No, because it's included in the World Iceborne tier down here. It's an old monster, but Kyurem, I'll rank it for you now since you asked. Kyurem is going on mid-C tier. This monster, it's so cool by design, and I love the way it looks and everything about it. I just don't like fighting it. This thing is so obnoxious to fight, especially in recent games. It's small, it'll knock you over, it'll electrocute you, and it moves at the speed of light, and it's really spastic. Design on Kyurem, A. Fight for Kyurem, D-. So split the difference. It's going mid-C tier. Fighting that thing in World Iceborne actually walled me for a little bit because I was using a gun lance and in World, and then in Iceborne I was using a greatsword. Slow weapon fighting master rank Kyurem. Oh, so brutal. That took me a long time to get through. So, yeah, this is our preview of things to come, but I'm splitting the difference, putting it in the middle. Good Lord. There's a lot of good stuff. There's some good stuff in the tier list to come. We've got newer monsters that were introduced in World Iceborne. We've got some new ones from Rise. We've got stuff that are essentially Elder Dragons from older games. I don't know why they were put at the bottom here. Maybe the creator forgot and added them later. But this was quite an exercise. But like I said before, I could talk about Monster Hunter all day. It's my favorite series. I played a lot of the games. I haven't played them all. I played good chunk of the games where all these come from. So at some point we will return to the tier list and come up with the final. And that will be the definitive word from me. And we can compare notes to everyone else who fills this thing out. So before we jump off, let me take a look and see if anyone I know is online to raid. Let's see. I see Demon Otter, Aaron Dwight, Lena, Moo, and Bean. We can raid Aaron. I've not raided them in a while. Playing Super Mario Sunshine. So what we'll do is I will pause the BGM. And we'll go ahead and go to outro. And once again, thanks to everyone who swung by and hung out for today's stream. This is a little bit more of a long-winded talky stream. But again, this is all in anticipation of Sunbreak, which I believe unlocks at 9 my time tonight. So I will most likely be playing it. And we'll be streaming it for the first time this weekend for sure on Saturday. So, more Monster Hunter stuff to come in the future. We will definitely be looking at more stuff, and we will finish this tier list off in a later session. So once again, thanks for hanging out, folks, and now we will go raid Aaron. I will catch you guys in the next stream.